Health inspectors. What's the worst thing you've ever found in a restaurant or shop? I once finished up a foodborne illness investigation, not finding much that could have caused the illness, so I left. I parked my car on the other side of the street in full view of the restaurant I was just at. I watched the dishwasher come out the back door, light a cigarette, smoke for a minute, then hunch over and frickin' hurl all over the grass. Then he took another drag and went back inside. I have mild emetophobia, so I got a bit of a cold sweat and then ran across the streets and basically dragged him outside. I've got a lot of stories, but that was the worst for me. I was a health inspector long ago. Was at a Golden Corral, going through the kitchen area. As I was squatting down to check a dishwasher, my foot broke through the tile floor and into a sewer pipe that ran underneath. Cockroaches came boiling out of the hole. Turns out the entire floor was rotten from a water leak in the sewer pipe. Best or worst part? The general manager tried to fight me when I told them they had to close down until they fixed the open hole into a pipe full of cockroaches and waste. In the mid-80s, I managed a pizza delivery store, and the health inspector came by kind of late and asked me to step outside. He started apologizing, but it was his job to follow up when they have a specific complaint concerning food safety. But this one was odd. He proceeded to tell me that a customer complained that while they were in the store, 2 male workers did the deed on the counter and didn't even wash their hands. I very dryly responded that couldn't have happened, as we always wash our hands after doing that on the cutting table. With a small grin, he said that's what he thought and he appreciated our efforts. He was our inspector for several years after that. A 14-inch border of mold and dirt scum all around the edge of the restaurant. Boxes that had 5-year-old shipping labels blocking the path to the mops and mop buckets and mop sink. No sanitizer buckets, no sanitizer cloths. No sanitizer, period. Mold in the fans blowing over open food in the cooler. I didn't even bother finishing the inspection, I just shut them down. I used to work on my own as a baker in a supermarket, and the cleaners would come at 10 p.m. in the night when the last worker left, and he'd be finished by 2 a.m. when I arrived. Well, one day I was half an hour early and I walked into my department and the cleaner was mopping the prep tables and the equipment with the same water he'd used to clean the floor. I wish I was joking. To use the mop on the tables to begin with is stupid, but using the same water as well? Insane. I told his boss when he came in because I simply had to, and his face was a picture. He didn't believe me until I got him to have a look on the CCTV. Oh, and I forgot, he wasn't even supposed to touch the machinery. That was my job. So he was dirtying my already clean equipment. Poor guy, getting reprimanded for going above and beyond the call of duty to make his employers happy, and he ends up getting ratted out anyway. Rest in peace, you enthusiastic but deluded soul. Not an inspector, but my significant other told me about what happened at a popular seafood restaurant in my town. A guy working the fry station had a magnetic kitchen timer above the fryer stuck to the hood vent above. One day, the timer fell into the hot grease. They managed to fish out the main plastic part, but the batteries were nowhere to be found. It was determined that the batteries must have disintegrated into the grease. Being a seafood restaurant in the south, half the menu is fried. The owner is too much of a skinflint to stop serving fried food and change out the grease during the dinner rush, so whoever ate catfish that night had it fried in a tangy, alkaline grease. Health inspector here. Here are my top 3. First, an old liquor store, which had once been the front unit of a housing duplex, which had now converted into a full-service deli. We're talking sandwiches, fried chicken, stuff like that. They did this without plan review, so they were severely lacking in all the proper space and equipment. What I observed was rat infestation, droppings everywhere in the place, mountains of old cast-off equipment in the back, giving the rats a home, meat defrosting on the hood of an inoperable car in the side alley. The back unit of the duplex, now converted to food storage, had unfinished wooden boards on the floor, which were now soft and rotten from soaking up years of meat juice and everything else. Then there was the time I was inspecting a Chinese buffet. I noted to the employees that there were tubs of frozen fried shrimp stacked on top of one another without covers, so they needed to discard the top layers of the food and put on the tub lids. As they scrambled to do so, they knocked over the tower of shrimp, spilling it everywhere. As I was standing there, they hurriedly started scooping the shrimp off the floor and back into the tubs. Like, I'm standing right here, you guys. A guy ordered commercial sausage-making equipment delivered to his private home. The manufacturer got suspicious and tipped off the health department. Turns out the guy would go hunting all sorts of exotic game meat without permits, process them into sausages in his rat-infested garage, there were droppings the size of jelly beans in there, and he was selling his sausages to the public. Don't buy from home cooks, folks. High-end Thai restaurant in the popular tourist area. Go downstairs to the kitchen and open up their freezer. On the top shelf of the freezer, they're storing loose beef, pork, and chicken in 3 separate piles. The meats are not in any containers. They're all sitting on a large piece of cardboard that the restaurant had placed on the bottom of the shelf. We poke the cardboard and our finger goes right through it. The juices from the 3 meats had turned the cardboard into pulp. We then notice it dripping from the combined sludge of chicken, pork, and beef blood. From the looks of the cardboard, it had been dripping for a while. We looked to the shelf below to see the results of the drip. Underneath the meats, in the shelf second from the top, the restaurant was storing 3 buckets of ice cream, without lids, directly under the meat drip. We look inside the ice cream containers and see congealed, partially frozen, cardboard-laced raw meat drippings pooled in the center of each tub of ice cream. Oh. None of the ice creams were more than halfway full. We ask the kitchen manager how long they've been storing their items like this. He doesn't remember. At least a few months. My theory is because the place was A, a nice restaurant, and B, an ethnic restaurant, patrons were less likely to complain about the odd flavors. For example, instead of complaining about blood in the ice cream, they were wondering out loud if the taste is star anise. That's one of the few inspections that made me feel physically ill. The place still got an A because the restaurant grade system in my city is about as effective as the TSA. One time I saw 2 cat-sized rats procreating in the window of a Chinatown restaurant in New York City. The place had an A and was right next to a police station. The cops were also watching, shining their flashlights at them, but the rats just kept on going. It was inspiring, really. So this is from the other side, but quite unique. A long time ago, while I was in college, I used to maintain aquariums. Quite a few were in restaurants. There was an old-school seafood restaurant that had tons of tanks. Great customers and a cool place. I'd be out there at least once a week for half a day making everything spotless. This was before cell phones, you youngsters. I was in class and my pager, yes, my pager, was blowing up from their number. I call and one of the Mexican staff picks up and all I could gather is, "Please, Mr. Fishman, you come now, very big problem, emergencia." I head out there and there are health inspectors on site. So, for all the tanks I care for, if a fish dies, I ask the owner to put it in a bag and freeze it so I can take a look and see if I can figure out why it kicked the bucket. Well, one of their very old and very large and pretty beat-up blue tangs, Dory, had died and they had frozen it per my instructions. The inspectors had shown up to this seafood restaurant and first thing they saw was this decrepit old fish that had been munched on by the other fish in the tank alongside the catch of the day. It was before opening, and only the Mexican staff were there who had no idea how to explain it. I got it sorted out, but it was pretty funny. Oh no. As good as it seems you were at your job, I think you narrowly avoided getting the entire place shut down for serving the aquarium's exotic fish for customers. Some would call that being thrifty, others would call it shockingly disgusting. It's all about perspective, I guess. A tuna canning plant in Los Angeles was off of Terminal Island. The processing plant owned the entire island a few miles offshore. Needless to say, had to take a boat to the plant to look at some machinery that they needed repaired. We got to the plant and there were dozens of cats. Inside the plant, outside the plant, in the warehouses, everywhere. Nobody said anything. They were even in the office building. After a few trips, I finally asked, and one guy said in a joke, "Look, it's either rats or cats. We don't have a rat problem here." Heard this story through a guy who services my soft-serve machines. As info for those not in the ice cream business, most soft-serve machines need to be cleaned, meaning fully disassembled, scrubbed and sanitized, at least weekly, some of them every 3 days. He got a call from a woman complaining that the vanilla side of her machine was coming out with black specks in it. She was worried it might be grinding up an O-ring or worse. He took the head off the machine and claims he nearly lost his lunch as the barrel was infested with cockroaches. Apparently, the woman had never cleaned the machine in the several months she had been open. Somehow, roaches got into it, I guess at night when the barrel stops freezing and just keeps the mix cool so it returns to a liquid, and they were being ground up and expelled as additional protein. How long had it been doing this? About a week. Ugh, poor customers. I had this happen at a local McDonald's years ago. The friend I was with got a milkshake and took a couple of sips and began pulling foreign objects out of his mouth, enough to realize it was probably a bug. He went back up to the counter to discreetly tell them and ask for a refund. The girl copped a major attitude, to which my friend said, "Well, fine, but you might want to check your machine regardless." She went and opened it up and all the color drained from her face and she gave him a refund. I worked at a movie theater. One night I was working cash registers and it was busy. This lady awkwardly grabbed something in her purse and tried to hand me something without showing me. I was confused because she had just walked up and put her bag on the counter. I said I can take her money once she puts in her order. She said no, it's a cockroach from her purse and she doesn't want anyone to think we have bugs. I don't like bugs, so I grabbed the nearest coworker and he took it from her. He tried just putting it in the trash. I double-bagged it and took it to the outside garage. Who knew I'd need to be trained on what to do when a customer brings in bugs? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I've worked on ice machines during summers and Christmas breaks ever since I was 16. Well, one time I went in to install a new machine at a restaurant with one of the other guys. We get into their kitchen and there were cockroaches absolutely everywhere. Now, this was gross enough, but it got worse. We took off the face of the ice machine to find a huge cockroach in the water sump. So every bit of ice that came out of that machine was cockroach ice. Never went back there and never will. Guys, it's my first time in Bangkok, Thailand. I just went on a food tour. I don't know if you know about Bangkok, but it is humid as heck here. Some of the vendors had fish sitting in cardboard, with flies, cockroaches, and rats as far as the eye can see. I ate all the food though. I'll let you know if I die. Okay, update. I'm past the 24-hour mark for the most questionable thing I ate. So we all believe we're in the clear. Thank you all for your concern, and especially the people who eat this food every day and reassured me that my concerns are completely valid. I do a lot of polishing and chrome plating. I am not a health inspector, but I do a lot of work for restaurants. I got a call to chrome plate some refrigerator racks. It's a common request. These are large 36 to 48-inch long racks and grills that the food sits on. This one high-end steakhouse that I used to go to called me in. Their racks were literally falling apart. There were rusted joints, old food hanging off them. It was just disgusting. I explained that it can't be repaired, but they insisted that we just shine them up, do whatever's needed. I refused that job, left, and wanted to throw up. Never went to that restaurant again. I did immediately call the health department on them. I don't know what happened. I can tell you what they didn't find. When I worked at Denny's, when the health inspector came, the cooks took all of their expired food out of the fridge and stored it in their cars and by the dumpster until after the health inspector had left, and then they put it all back. I ended up quitting that job after I got written up for refusing to change the dates on the labels of all the expired food, which was one of the primary jobs of the graveyard server. So a friend of mine is a health inspector. She walks into a local convenience store and discovers a litter box behind the counter. Totally unacceptable. Tells the proprietor that he needs to get rid of the litter box. That's kind of a health code violation. He replies, "Well, it's for the cat. We've been having mice and rat issues." To which she's all, "Oh." The cat walks up. She tells him he can't have a cat in a food establishment. He hands the cat to his wife and she takes it out of the store to their camper trailer nearby the store. Waits for her to leave. Rinse and repeat. Worked in a restaurant, and whenever a health inspector came, I had to go to the kitchen to tell the cooks to put on gloves and hairnets. It's not that they didn't wash their hands or anything, they were old school with cooking, but it was still a violation. I think in the countries and years that I worked in fast food and restaurants, these things either weren't compulsory, or that rule was so flagrantly disregarded that the entire industry, including the health inspectors, just laughed it off. Wild. A restaurateur was trying to reopen a failed one into a new one. It had been a Mexican joint and was going to be a deli. I was working for a pest control company and they called us to take care of, quote, a few bugs. So no big deal, they're just proactive. I get there and it's clean and smells okay, but I'm about 1 month into this job and experience. I go to get started and I'm mixing up the stuff we have to use in restaurants and I'm using the water from one of their triple sinks. The water is coming out hot. It's a Vegas summer, so I'm letting it run until it cools down some. I look over at the floor sink that the triple sink drains into, and there are a lot of German cockroaches coming out of it. I fill up the 2 gallons, put the pump and handle back in, and shake it to mix it, pump it to pressurize, and get to work. As I'm going and hitting all of the cracks and crevices behind the sinks, the equipment, and under everything, the seam in the wipe-down plastic walls and stuff, roaches just start pouring out into the open. It's in the thousands stage. And when I stand still for long enough, they're trying to hide under my boots. The last time I have to stop to pump up the canister, I'm standing on it, the stainless steel with the brass handle between my feet. Screw this. I call on the radio for a coworker who I know is nearby because he has a fog unit, and I don't at this point. I'm newly hired and I wasn't 100% kitted out. So Tony swings by, I'm waiting outside, and we renegotiate the service. The new owner had been a little on the light side with the depth of his problem. He agrees and we get to fogging. Tony's showing me how to do it, so I'm just walking behind him. At this point, there's tens of thousands of roaches everywhere. Floor, walls, and ceiling. We get to the walk-in, and above, where I think the compressor was, there's a 4-foot by 8-foot by 10-foot space. Tony directs the fog stream up in there, and the roaches start cascading out, pouring out in such numbers that briefly, you could barely see the stainless steel of the walk-in door. The entire rest of that day, any little itch on my skin, and you're leaping to slap at it and check it's not a roach stuck on you. They were refilling the Heinz bottles with Hunts. I used to be a busboy at a nice Italian restaurant in my hometown. We had problems with the Chinese place across the street because we found out that they'd been taking the lettuce that we threw in the dumpster at the end of the night. Our manager used to stand outside and guard the dumpster so they wouldn't take our garbage. Another experience working at a local cafe, I was cutting up cheese from a walk-in fridge, and I found a hole in the cardboard box that the cheese was kept in. Turned out it was from rats or mice, and they were eating the cheese. I told my manager about it, and he told me to cut around the bite marks and still use the cheese. I left that job shortly after. I worked in the deli of a convenience store for nearly 15 years. It was a constant struggle to explain to my boss how I couldn't save the leftover chicken and veggies and sell them the next morning. My customers were very happy to pay more knowing the food was always fresh. 6 months ago, the boss decided to lease out the kitchen and move me to the main store. Ex-customers kept coming to me to complain about the food tasting bad and making them sick, so I went back to check and counted about 6 violations that would get them shut down or fined. Clorox bleach stored on the floor next to the chicken breading, defrosting meat stored above the vegetables where it dripped down onto them, and at the end of the day the cook took all of the food trays and put them, uncovered, into the fridge to sell the next day without letting them at least cool down. It smelled like rotting food back there since they never clean out the drains. I've also seen her cutting uncooked meat with a machete on the bare floor, and she never ices down the raw chicken at the end of the day, so it starts to stink by mid-week. Boss has lost half of his regular customer base. I worked at a Gigi's Cupcakes franchise where the owners just didn't understand that waste was expected and all fresh cupcakes every day were the basis of the company's overpriced appeal. They regularly flipped the bird at the corporate shelf time limits, which were 12 hours for filled cupcakes and 24 for non-filled, only if freshly baked. 12 hours across the board if they were pulled from the freezer, which we were supposed to have a few of at the start of the day while we baked everything all fresh. They hyper-focused on waste, and their quality just fell through the floor. Every kitchen staff member quit, and they went out of business less than a year later. That should have been an easy cash cow for them, but they just didn't listen. If you promise fresh, people expect fresh. I worked at a sushi and hibachi restaurant for about a year as a server, host, and delivery driver. This place had tons of things that were certainly questionable, but a few of them ended up causing me to leave the place. In the dry storage area, they had cleaning chemicals directly above all of the to-go food packages and plasticware. In that same storage space, I'd randomly see a sleeping bag and pillow tucked away every once in a while. It always stuck out, but I never really thought too much about it until I went out back to grab a bottle of wine, and sure enough, I stepped on a sleeping woman. She started yelling, and I just ran out. My manager pulled me aside later, which I assumed was going to be a conversation about keeping that hush-hush, but no. The dude offered me $25,000 to marry a Thai chick so she could get a green card. My response to him was my 2 weeks' notice. Integrity move. Some of us would have at least stuck around long enough to check if we could take the $25,000 and run, but I respect what you did there. Worked in a popular sandwich shop. Our floor drains were smelling rancid for weeks and were backing up with what I assumed to be sewage. My manager told our owners every single day for 3 weeks that this needed to be fixed, and they did nothing. So in the middle of my shift one day, a health inspector came in and immediately shut us down. My manager told me right there that she had anonymously called the health department because that was the only way the owners were going to end up fixing the problem. Major lol. I ordered tacos from a high-end vegan restaurant in LA. When I bit into the taco, I felt immediately a hard chunk gently slice into the roof of my mouth. I pulled out a 1-inch shard of glass from my taco. Management said they accidentally broke a glass near the tacos, and they thought they got all of it. They offered a new plate of free tacos, but I was like, my mouth is bleeding. Why would I want another taco? This happened to me at Cracker Barrel, but it was a piece of porcelain plate in my coleslaw, so it blended in pretty well. They offered me a discount, with the manager stating that, I guess a plate broke or something. I'm not a big Cracker Barrel fan now. When I was in my late teens, I worked at a 5-star restaurant, don't know how they got that, where they were using potatoes and other produce with maggots in them consistently. Restaurants like these easily charge people $285 to $350 a head for events like New Year's Eve. They got shut down. I work for a local council in the UK, and I was asked by our environmental health officers, or EHOs, to assist with a rat infestation. They wanted to arrange for the tunnels that the rats had borrowed to be filled with concrete. We followed the tunnels along the footway and into the kitchen of a World Bar and Grill, one of those buffet places that do food from all around the world as an all-you-can-eat deal. These tunnels were only small, but once you got into the kitchen, there were over 200 rats. They were in and on everything. Droppings everywhere, nests everywhere, the place was disgusting. I should point out that these rats had been there for up to 6 months, and the restaurant was still open up until the day of the inspection. The guy who owned the place offered to pay extra if we could do it quickly so he could reopen. The EHO laughed and said the place was going to be condemned until he was happy to eat food off the floor. What's the most unhinged gift that you've ever pretended to love? My parents found the Amazon wish list of someone with the same name as me, but not me. Thought it had a bunch of weird items, but decided to not check in with me or any other family member to see if they had the right list. And that's how I, as a 24-year-old male, got a maternity body pillow for Christmas. The same crock pot 3 years in a row from my ex-husband's mother. His new wife was gifted one last year. I'm certain that this woman has a pallet of crock pots stashed somewhere in her house. Once, when I was 18, my great-aunt found out I liked cats, so for Christmas she got me a clip-on tail with matching ears. A girl I went to high school with and ended up taking college classes with wore them all throughout college. The class was on effective public speaking, and we had to write a paper and do a presentation on persuasion. We'd choose any topic to persuade someone into trying said topic. Her choice was on why you should be a furry. Maybe your aunt thought you were into that? My brother, maybe 11 at the time, took the wrapping paper off his gift from our grandmother. It was in a tape dispenser box, and cue everyone laughing, "Oh, you got a tape dispenser." We got pretty quiet when it turned out to be a tape dispenser. Ugh. Lesbian Christmas. My parents thought I was a lesbian and wanted to be supportive. They gave me pink triangle earrings and poetry books by lesbians. I'm not gay. The very first holiday after my wedding. My mother-in-law sends my wife and I, each separately, the same self-help book on how to survive living with a hostile spouse. Not how to divorce or anything, but how to live in the relationship with an awful, bullying significant other. Not just to her, not just to me, to both of us. 2 copies of the same book. My sister bought me a CD she really wanted for herself. When I opened it, she said, "If you don't like it, I'll just take it." I didn't like it, but I kept it. Screw her. That is the sibling pettiness that most of us can relate to. I don't want it, but I'm going to keep it so that you don't get to enjoy it. But I'm not saying your sister didn't have that coming. Most of us really are just the worst at that age. I was a step-grandchild, and my grandmother sold Avon to feed her QVC addiction. So while the other 6 grandchildren got real leather jackets, diamond jewelry, motocross lessons, and one year an actual motocross bike, I got plastic Avon jewelry. For reasons too long to list here, I got placed with my grandparents 2 weeks before Christmas when I was 16. I watched everyone open up their gifts, and then one aunt gave me a Walmart bag with some socks in it. Another one told me I should be grateful that the family was taking me in instead of leaving me on the street, and that was my present. 7 aunts and uncles and their spouses, along with my grandparents, and that's how they treated me in a situation that was out of my control. Needless to say, I don't talk to my family anymore. I used to be a little standoffish at work because I'm shy, sitting on my phone instead of socializing with coworkers. For the Secret Santa, I got my guy a nice bottle of bourbon because I knew that was something he'd like. I, in turn, got a book about how sitting on your phone too much makes you a jerk. When I was about 22, my mum somehow figured out I had a secret crush on Mark Wahlberg. All I got for Christmas that year were Mark Wahlberg DVDs. From everyone, in various boxes and wrappings, like so many Mark Wahlberg DVDs. I stopped saying, thanks, after probably the 5th one. I've been a vegetarian for 20 years now. Last Christmas, my aunt gave me a barbecue cookbook and told me it was because men won't date a woman who doesn't know how to cook them a steak. Joke's on you, Auntie Lisa. I'm not single because I'm a vegetarian, I'm single because I have a crap personality. When I was 18, my boyfriend's mum got me an Elmo live toy. I thought it was a gag gift, but it wasn't. My boyfriend got angry when I told him that no, I didn't love it. I didn't say that to his mum though, she was genuinely a very sweet woman. When I had my daughter, my grandmother arbitrarily decided that I was going to collect nutcrackers. Every year she gives us a new one. So now I have 13 creepy, 1.5 foot tall wooden men of various types in my living room for the whole of December. I hate them and fully believe that one day they'll rise up and murder me in my sleep. When my sister and I were younger, my dad liked to leave us a Christmas stocking full of small gifts, like novelties, candy, on our beds. This was very adorable until one year, for reasons unclear, he supplied us both with soft adult calendars, like Babes with No Tops for me, oiled up banana hammock wearing Chippendales for my 14 to 15-year-old sisters. After discreetly saying, "What the frick?" to each other on Christmas morning, we got rid of them, and for 20 years, they've never been mentioned by anyone involved. A hot pink sweater that was literally covered in sparkles with a little bow on it. I was 17 and I had to pretend to like it so I didn't hurt my aunt's feelings. When I was 12, I asked my mum for a pair of Converse. Instead of going for the basic ones, she got these checkered pink, red, blue ones that were just so horribly ugly. I pretended to like them, but then asked my mum later if we could exchange them. We did, although I still feel kind of bad. An industrial-sized jar of dill pickles. From my grandparents. The old Costco special, huh? A few years ago, my in-laws handed out their gifts to my wife and me, and my wife's sister and her then-boyfriend. I opened my gift and it was a, very large jar of Cajun seasoning. It was like the size you'd get at Costco. Huge. I was sort of confused because they gave their other daughter's boyfriend 3 to 4 t-shirts, a hat and a jacket from his favorite sports team, along with a gift card to a store he likes. And all they could come up with for me was a seriously huge jar of cooking seasoning? My father-in-law said he knew I liked to cook. I don't like to cook at all, by the way, and I got the impression that they just forgot to buy me anything or couldn't be bothered to come up with anything better. I really don't mind getting a weird gift or even no gift at all, but it hurts when it's so clearly obvious that they didn't care enough to even put a modicum of thought into it, while at the same time I see them buy such thoughtful gifts for their other daughter's boyfriend when I've been their son-in-law for 5 years at that point. I put the seasoning in their pantry before we left to go home. My dad gifted me his old phone when he upgraded. I guess it could have been an okay gift as I had an older phone that I wanted to upgrade, but I just wasn't in a hurry or prioritizing buying a new one. It was the same damn phone I had, and it was more beat up than mine. I was also 30 with the clear ability to upgrade if I wanted to. My uncle gave me a hat once, back in my low to mid-teens. It wasn't an awful hat, but certainly not one I'd ever wear. I felt really bad laughing at it, thinking it was a gag gift, since it clearly made my uncle sad. He's only given me gift cards since. It was years ago, but it still makes me feel awful. So my family makes this our theme. Instead of Merry Christmas, we have Happy Crappy Christmas. Basically, instead of spending hundreds of dollars on gifts we don't know if the other person will like, we just buy dollar store and wish gifts that we're fairly certain the recipient won't like, but we laugh at the idea of it. Last year, I think my sister won when she bought us cheap Chinese butthole bleaching kits. My sister-in-law gives us salt and pepper shakers. The uglier, the better. We have about 10 pairs now. She buys them at yard sales. Usually it's some long-grown kid's school art project. 2 walnuts glued together with googly eyes, and a salt shaker drilled in, 2 psychedelic mushrooms, and 2 very deformed cats. One of the recent videos I did on the channel featured some rather surprisingly habitual salt and pepper shaker thieves, most of whom were described as being older ladies. I wonder if we've had one of them appear in 2 videos in a row. That would be incredible. Also, crappy gift. The same box of specially spiced tea that I gave to my mum the year before. I tried to unload it to my sister-in-law the year after that. My family always did the post office Christmas gift donation thing. You know, the one where you get a kid's age and gender to buy them gifts. Well, even on Social Security, my dad would give us the choice to do it, even if it meant us getting less. I loved it. I always looked forward to it. My mum remarries, and her new husband thinks it's a great idea to sign us up to receive gifts from the program, and I've never felt so ashamed. I think I felt guilty because it felt like I was taking someone's Christmas from them. I kept asking my mum if we're going to do it that year, and when she finally drives us to the post office, I got excited to pick out a name. She drives to the back and instead picks up 3 bags of presents. 3 bags for 2 kids? I was mortified. When I finally opened the presents, they acted like they got them for us. I wasn't allowed to be ungrateful, however, because the people who got me presents went all out. A really warm coat and a soft as frick blanket, art supplies, really nice ones. That helped me get over myself, but I still feel crappy today. As a teacher, a can of shaving cream and a mini razor. I guess that did get used, though, unlike the 57 mugs I received. A queen-sized top sheet, like for your bed. There was no fitted sheet to go with it, and I didn't have a queen-sized bed. A book on beating alcoholism and a book on losing weight. Oh, you know what? Screw you, Aunt Ruth. An ugly homemade felt Santa head. It looked like someone hunted Santa down, shot him, and mounted his head on the wall. It became my favorite Christmas decoration. My sister always buys me joke gifts. The coolest one was a Chinese bootleg Thomas the Tank Engine Voltron. The most what the frick one was a gourd. A jar of peanut butter that was already open. God bless you, Grandma. After a horrible breakup, I got drunk one Christmas morning, went to my room to get my roommate her gift, and came back with an open jar of peanut butter and a half-eaten cracker. I was mortified when I sobered up. My roommate insisted on keeping the peanut butter. My grandmother sent me a pink dress in a size 8 with cutaway shoulders one year. I was a 16-year-old boy. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My wife still receives a little kid's coloring book and crayons every year from her one grandpa and his wife for Christmas. She made the mistake of telling him that she liked to color when she was 8. A year ago, my mum got me a small, novelty-size butter churn for Christmas. It's not pretty, it's not an art piece, and it has no decorative value. The same year, she got my younger brother a Nintendo Switch and Breath of the Wild. One time, my aunt was on the wrong combination of medicines, and yes, she did eventually correct it, but while she was on the cocktail, she gave my brother and I gift bags that had a single clementine and 2 unsharpened pencils apiece. The first Christmas that my girlfriend, now wife, and I spent with my parents, we were opening gifts in my living room, and my mum gave me a vibrating Johnson ring as a stocking stuffer. When I was 14 or 15, I told my mum that I really liked Andes mints. Every year since then, I get Andes mints. I stopped being crazy about them when I was about 20 or so. I have a stack of several years of boxes going until I finally made my husband take it to work to give it away. Snow shovel from my grandparents for my 13th birthday. They said I could use it to make money and buy whatever I wanted. Well, they weren't wrong. My cat bought me a quail once. Did you eat it? That's one heck of a gift from your feline friend there. My brother bought me a body-sized male contraceptive and labeled it, "To the biggest member in the world." I got him a sweet clock that had backwards numbers and turned counterclockwise. We didn't really get along back then. My dad gave me an air compressor. It was about waist high, the size of a mini fridge, the kind that you might have in your garage. Except I didn't have a garage because I was living in an apartment and I had nowhere to put it. I've moved since then, but I still don't have a garage or anywhere to put the thing. So it's sitting unopened in my friend's garage until I can find a better use for it. I'm not at all religious, but that didn't stop my father from giving me an 18-inch tall statue of Jesus. I forgot it in a box in a storage room in his basement when I left. Last year I went through a pretty crappy breakup that kept being dragged through me and my ex being off and on for a while. I started to feel better around Christmas, but still woke up that morning and opened my stocking to find that Santa, my mum, had gifted me a mold-your-own-boyfriend kit out of clay. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. I did spend a nice evening molding an absolute stud, though. Well, it sounds like it was at least a fun distraction for an evening during a tough time. Arts and crafts are good for this when we're feeling blue. They take up just enough of our brains to placehold for the mind-numbing grief. My in-laws, parents and siblings, all got me pajamas. The issue was when I opened the first set, they said, "Since you sleep so much." What the frick? Clowns. Every year, a new clown. I tried to tell my abuelito that I don't like clowns, they're weird. I get a new clown figurine, doll, lamp, picture, or whatever every year for Christmas and my birthday. I have boxes of clowns. Thankfully, sometime in my mid-20s, my father managed to divert them to kittens, but that was only after 4 awkward years when he decided I love cows. I don't love cows either. On the bright side, since I kept all of them on my dresser growing up, I was never afraid of clowns. They're just background noise to me. I could probably walk right into Stephen King's It and just be all like, "Oh, it's just one more damn clown." My grandmother decided it would be a good idea to gift my sister and my cousin, also a girl, matching lingerie last year for Christmas. The problem being that my cousin was 7 at the time. We still laugh about it when my grandma isn't around. My aunt gave me a banana case. Yes, a yellow plastic thing to put a banana in and protect it from the world. The next year, it was an apple case. For our first Christmas together, my boyfriend gave me this beautifully wrapped Christmas gift. I opened it in front of his entire family, and it was the ugliest pair of shoes I've ever seen, like grandmother slipper clogs. The look on my face told everyone how I really felt, even though I said how much I liked them. They burst out laughing as it was a prank, and my boyfriend had another gift hiding. Even to this day, when my wife and I make pretty decent money, my grandmother, a 96-year-old, still writes us a check for $15 every Christmas. It's very kind of her, but not as awesome to receive in your 30s as it was when I was 12. My grandma decides how much she wants to spend at Christmas and then divides that number by the number of cousins, which keeps growing since my southern cousins are baby machines. Last year, my Christmas check was for $13. Oh, and 46 cents. My neighbor gave me a rather crude painting of myself being run over by his crappy, horrible Bronco. In 2006 for Christmas, I gave my then-fiancée a $450 hand-carved artist's easel. She gave me a 4-pack of Ferrero Rocher chocolates. A large box of Johnnies from my grandma because she overheard me and my ex going at it while she was visiting for the holidays, and walked in on us in the heat of the moment. Thankfully, the lights were off, but yeah, it was awkward and hilarious at the same time. Quality beats quantity. I once had a girlfriend that gifted me about 12 to 15 items of clothing from Goodwill. Don't get me wrong, I have no problem with this in principle. For instance, trying to save money, but it just made no sense because 1, this girl didn't hurt for money at all, and 2, several of the items had stains or other damage. And finally, by getting so many things, she spent more than she would have for one new item of clothing. It was easily the worst gift I've ever received. An avocado. My girlfriend, now wife, used to complain that I bought Annie's organic macaroni. Her parents once bought me a Costco pack of Kraft so she could have good macaroni. I got a seal clubbing nutcracker from a well-meaning family friend. They thought the seal was a pet and the guy was just petting it with his club. Ugh. When we were younger, my grandmother would always give the grandkids a bag full of random stuff. We'd get things like pajamas, fuzzy socks, a stationery set, and things like that, but every year, without fail, she'd always throw in a package of undies. Of course, we'd all act excited and thank our grandmother, but we were still kids unwrapping underwear for Christmas. My grandmother is the sentimental type and also wanted all of us to take turns showing everyone what we got. Usually we didn't show off our undies, but my grandmother would always say, "I think there's something else. Show everyone what you got." So for Christmas, we had to hold up the undies for our aunts and uncles to see and for whoever else was there for Christmas. She stopped giving us undies once the oldest grandkids started becoming preteens. Looking back, all of us find it hilarious and I'll probably remember it for the rest of my life. My grandmother was just trying to get us something we'd actually use, whether we wanted it for Christmas or not. And being a kid, underwear is definitely a, thanks moment. My husband has relatives who work in a thrift store, so the entire family gets some really weird presents for them. I got a used nightgown, like what grandmas would wear. It was white, but it had turned yellow from age, and it smelled musty too. A stained incense stick holder with some incense sticks in a package that was already opened, a collection of china plates with stains, a shirt so big I could swim in it, a lightly used bottle of perfume that was pretty much eau de mothballs. I just donated them right back to another thrift store. When I was about 10, my grandfather bought me a BB gun for Christmas. Obviously, I thought it was the coolest thing in the world then, but my parents were very uncomfortable with it. And looking back at it, buying a 10-year-old as immature as I was a BB gun was probably not a great idea. With regards to your uncle, he probably knew that you'd think of him as the most awesome uncle ever after that, even if your parents took that thing off you. Some very obviously second-hand cassette tapes of whale music. I've had some amazing ones from my mother-in-law. A how to cook pasta book, a ceramic hen, one candle in a gift box that clearly originally had 2 candles in it, a pasta measurer shaped like a cowboy, and my absolute favorite, chocolate-covered nuts. I'm allergic to nuts and I have an EpiPen. I've had 4 anaphylactic shocks in my life. My husband nearly had a heart attack when I opened that present. In the early 1990s, I got 3 fanny packs from 3 different relatives. A single pair of see-through pink lacy undies for my first Christmas I spent with my boyfriend's, now husband's, family. They were from his 86-year-old step-grandmother. I was 19 at the time and absolutely mortified, but tried to play it off like it was a hilarious gag gift. And I forget to mention, my husband just reminded me, that the panties were 3 times XL. And yes, I've got some extra winter cushion, but I'm not a big human being. It would take a lot to get me to fit a 3 times XL. So last year, my dad was short on money for Christmas. I took him shopping to buy stuff for everyone else, and he said he was going to pay me back. He never actually pays back what he borrows, and at the end he asked to borrow money for one more gift he needed to get. I gave him the money and he bought me a gift card. It was to a restaurant I like, but he literally took my money and put it into a less usable form. Remington electric razor specifically designed for black men. My dear grandmother bought it for me. It even said Black Men Razor and had a black dude smiling on the package. I'm about as white as it gets, always have been, probably always will be. Who knows, maybe you're just a late bloomer. Last year, my uncle and aunt got my boyfriend and I a giant white piggy bank with colorful baby symbols around it, to start saving for the baby. We're not married, we're in our early 20s, no baby on the horizon in the near future. It was a bit odd to say the least. Someone sent me a homemade miniature catapult for Reddit Secret Santa. What are they doing? The trebuchet is clearly the superior siege weapon. What insane thing did someone think was completely normal in their house? I knew a girl who'd get glasses of water, and whenever she couldn't finish the whole thing, she'd just dump the rest on the carpet because it's fine, it just absorbs it. I went to high school with a girl whose family would dress up their house like a model home being sold or something. For example, the dining room table was dressed with a plastic Thanksgiving feast with plastic food on nice plates and fake wine in fake glasses. When you walked into her bedroom, the bed was made with top corners open as if she had just got out of bed, and there was a tray with a fake bowl of cereal and a fake glass of orange juice. On the floor were coloring books and crayons as if a child lived in the room. They kept the place spotless, and every room had an odd theme of fake living. Her parents' bedroom had quite a few large African animal statues and fake rose petals leading to the bed. People actually get paid to live in model homes or homes for sale. They have to keep them immaculately clean and ready to be shown at any time. Maybe that's what happened. When I moved cities in grade 2 or 3, I didn't know anyone. I met someone the first day and he invited me to his house that weekend to stay over. Everything was great. We played GameCube and stayed up until 3 a.m., the latest I'd been awake to up at that point in my life. He said we had to sleep down in the basement so we don't wake his parents when we went upstairs. We go downstairs with our sleeping bags and immediately I knew something was wrong. The worst smell I've ever experienced filled my nostrils the further we descended. In the corner of the room was a bed covered in what looked like crusty blood and some pus-colored streaks. Turns out his mother had had a home birth the weeks before and kept the sheets as a memento. I haven't been back there since. You'd think the baby would be a good enough memento. Whole items of food left for days on the floor. Toddler not interested in that apple? That's fine. Just leave it there on the floor where he threw it. It'll work its way under a piece of furniture and out of sight if we give it some time. Once I went to these people's houses and there was an entire sandwich sitting in the corner of the living room floor. I was so distracted by it that I didn't really hear much of what was said during that visit. I just sat and stared at the floor witch. Well, that's how you get ants, and roaches, and mice, and rats, and I don't know what else. Truly revolting. I don't know how the author didn't mention the smell. Maybe these people did occasionally do a covert cleanup? I was friends with my Little League baseball coach's son. One day I was invited to their house for a playdate, and as I walked through the door I saw a huge framed white cloth with some weird symbol. I didn't think much about it because at the time I didn't know what the frick it was. My coach noticed me looking at it as I entered the house and said, my granddad wore that. It's been in the family for years. Naturally, I was like, oh, okay, whatever, and thought nothing of it ever again. Now that I'm older, I realize what it was. It was a clan robe. The worst part is that I am not white. When my brother and I were kids, we'd often comment that our next-door neighbor's house smelled like wee-wee. One day, my brother was playing video games with the kid from next door at his house and asked to use the restroom. The kid said, we just pee here, and started peeing in the closet. My brother peed in there too. When in Rome. Bathroom machete. Because, just in case, man. It's literally nothing more than a real machete that hangs in their bathroom, so if someone breaks in while you're fighting dirt dragons, you aren't at a total disadvantage. Everyone there was surprised when I said I'd never heard of it. I now keep a bathroom hammer handy because gosh darn it, that's a great idea. I had a friend in high school. Went to his house for the first time and everything smelled like wee-wee. Turns out he had a dog and his family never bothered to potty train or clean up after it. Everything in the house was covered in old dried up wee-wee and fresh puddles. While I was there, the dog wee-weed on my friend's bed and he didn't even care. He literally sleeps in his dog's number 1. Even I got wee-weed on. Never went to that house again. We were getting something out of his dad's closet when I noticed there was a ton of expensive electrical equipment in the back of it, all boxed up. I asked him about it. Apparently, his dad keeps everything new he gets for a year before he unboxes it and actually uses it. He didn't know why, and it still boggles my mind. The extent to which the owners had gone to preserve their furniture. Each piece of furniture, including the lampshades, had a custom-cut plastic shell draped over it. Every furniture leg had a plastic bowl underneath to distribute weight across the carpet, preventing indents. The strangest part was the plastic pathways laid out across the floor. These pathways were kind of like plastic carpets laid on top of the real carpet. You weren't allowed to walk on the actual carpet. Instead, you had to walk on these plastic mats that crisscrossed the floor and connected all of the rooms to each other. My friend's dad. When I was a kid, I used to stay for dinner, as kids do, but the dad would not eat with us. The mum would make a plate of food, take it down the hall and slide it halfway under the door to the basement. A few seconds later, the plate would slowly slide under the door. Nobody at the house seemed to think this was odd, but I thought it was weird as all heck. The other odd thing that this family did was every weeknight at 7, on the dot, the family would clear out of the living room so the dad could come and watch Star Trek. Once the show was over, he'd go back into the basement and the family would move back into the living room. Fricking what? The dad was quiet, but seemed to be normal other than those odd habits. The family thought none of that was weird, and my friend thought it was funny that my dad ate with us at dinner. I came here to mention the friends who kept their bread in the oven, but clearly I'm out of my league. We had a human skull in a glass case in our living room growing up. It was years before I figured out that was really weird. My mum got it from a doctor friend or something, just some random head, not like a relative or anything. We call him Freddy, and we had to superglue his jaw back on every few years when it fell off. I guess I'd repressed the memories, but just typing this now, I recall touching it and playfully tossing it around gently at times. I'm torn between wanting to respect the dead and really wanting that skull. A 5-year-old in diapers. I was an adult literacy volunteer, and I went to this couple's trailer. A kid walks in shirtless, wearing a diaper. At first, I thought it was a joke, then I thought maybe developmental issues. Then the mother says, "About time to change a diaper, ain't it?" And the kid said defiantly, "You ain't gonna change my diaper." My friend's mum often threatened to murder the whole family when she was angry. This was very scary to me, but my friend hardly thought anything of it. She just acts like that was normal mum stuff. That's the kind of threat you never actually want to call out or play chicken with. You can't go telling them to put their money where their mouth was. That lady probably needed help on a serious note. I went to a friend's house and they had their halls lined with grandfather clocks. This was a little weird, but nothing major. The weird part came when his dad told me and my friend, "Don't you kids go around telling anyone about my clocks." Now I'll never forget about his precious, precious clocks. I'll never forget as a child visiting my friend's house and noticing the wallpaper they had in his hallways. The pattern was of undressed women. Throughout his apartment, just little au naturel women all over the wall. We were maybe 8 years old and it was amazing. A cow tongue in place of a birthday cake. It wasn't like they couldn't afford a birthday cake either. They just had a cow tongue with a single candle in it. I knew a guy one time who'd get completely undressed every time he took a number 2, and then take a shower afterwards to really clean up. He'd even do this at other people's houses. I was about 12 or 13, visiting my best friend's house for the first time. After lunch, I get the urge to take a number 2. So I go to the restroom, do my thing, finish up, and flush. Nothing. Nothing happens. I take a step back and flush again. Still nothing. So I start freaking the F out. I'm a kid, I just broke my friend's toilet, I don't have any money to pay for it or buy a new one. I'm standing there sweating, trying to figure out a plan, and after 15 minutes, I've still got nothing. I finally decide to fess up. I mean, I can't stay there all day, can I? They'll eventually figure out something is wrong, right? I step outside and sheepishly tell his mum that I broke the toilet. She starts laughing, goes into the bathroom, turns on the water flow to the toilet, waits a few minutes, and then flushes. Easy peasy. Everyone, the best friend, his mum, and his sister, then takes the opportunity to start laughing at me because I didn't know it was normal to turn the water on and off whenever I needed to use the bathroom. To this day, if I'm unfamiliar with a restroom, I always do a precautionary flush just to make sure everything is working the way it should. One summer when I was about 13, a friend of mine had a friend from her school that invited us over to go swimming in her pool. We go to her place and we were shown her room to change in. As I'm changing, my friend suddenly whispers, "What the frick?" And I turn around to see a bunch of used sanitary pads lined up on this girl's desk. She comes to join us in her room, and my friend flat out asks her what those are all about. She says very plainly, "Oh, they're for my dad so he can check that I'm not pregnant." You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I dated a guy whose family was just odd. They did things so differently. Sometimes I wondered if they might be aliens. No one in the house knew how to use a stove. They used the microwave or ate out. Every cabinet and drawer in the house was always wide open, like they had no idea you could close them. The rest of the house was clean and organized, which made it all a stranger. His mother walked around pretty much undressed constantly and took about 10 baths a day. His parents would go to McDonald's to watch TV, despite having a very nice TV with satellite. His family had a lot of grandiose tales, things like they saved 2 men from a plane crash and how the mother outran a pack of wolves in suburban Arizona. There is a lot more, but these were what stuck in my mind. Spent the night at a friend's house in the 6th grade. He lived with just his mum, dad wasn't in the picture, and he was an only child, so they had a close relationship. We were having a great time until his mum called him for bath time. With her. Like, together. They even left the door open like it was nothing. Girl from my previous work invited some of us over for dinner. As it turns out, she had removed the toilet seating from her toilet. Because it doesn't look good enough with it on. You actually had to sit on the thin, cold ceramic rim. Since people have said this isn't uncommon in certain countries, this took place in Germany where toilets always have seats. I had a friend in high school whose family used a G.I. Joe aircraft carrier as a coffee table. I had one of those as a kid. It was so huge that my dad rigged a setup where it hung from my ceiling and he'd get it down for us to play with. One time after school, my friend and I tried to get it down with a broom and one side came unhooked. It knocked my poor friend out cold. He wasn't allowed over after that. Paramedic here, 100 2-liter soda bottles filled with wee-wee because, quote, the toilet is broken. But where was he going number 2? Where was he doing that? Maybe he was just supremely good at holding it in until he got to work or the library or whatever. In any case, gross. No way that you fill that many bottles without a substantial amount of splashback over time. I had a friend named David and he invited me to his house once. Little did I know that his family were horrific hoarders. You couldn't see the floor of his house, and I was literally stepping in bowls filled with cereal. At one point, I saw a snake just slither through the refuse and immediately made up an excuse that I was sick so I could go home. What a nightmare! My parents were in a bowling league and would bring me home with them. I made friends with a girl who hung out at the bowling alley because she lived in a home on an acre next to it. She invited me to come to her house while my parents bowled. I asked my parents and they said I could. She walked to her house and when I walked in there was a lion cub chained to a coffee table in the back room. She asked me if I wanted to pet the lion. Of course I did. I pet the lion, we hang out, I go back to the bowling alley like nothing happened. I told my parents and they're like, sure kid, you pet a lion. Years later, when I am reading the paper, the girl and her family were being arrested for illegally having exotic cats. I showed my parents and had the best I told you so moment in my life. Not me, but when my dad was younger, he went to a friend's house who had a hallway filled with au naturel family pictures. One of my wife's co-workers invited us to a dinner party. He's a very accomplished doctor who is supposedly considered the foremost authority in his specialty. I knew the man had a huge ego, but nothing prepared me for what I saw when we went to his home. As soon as we walked in the door, there was a life-sized painting of himself that one of his patients had given him as a gift. Nothing strange about that. He saved a patient's life and they were very grateful, so they gave him a painting. His wife took our jackets, hung them up, then walked us to his massive living room where the rest of the guests are mingling. As I looked around the room to take in what a magnificent home this man has, I noticed there were hundreds of pictures lining his shelves and walls. Every single one of those pictures was of him. Not of his wife, not of his 4 wonderful kids, nor his siblings, parents, or someone he admires. Even the pictures that looked like they might have been group photos were cropped so that only he could be seen. I'm terrible at hiding my true feelings. My face usually gives me away every time, but I spent the next hour desperately trying to pretend like this wasn't remotely strange. After a few drinks, I decided to head to the bathroom. I had to take a dump, and I'm not shy about doing so at another person's home. I walked into their guest bathroom, closed the door, lifted up the lid, sat down, and grabbed one of a dozen books that were sitting next to the John. The first book I picked up is written by our host, so I picked up a different one and it was also written by him. I looked at the bookends and all of them were written by our host. Partly amused and partly disgusted, I looked up and noticed that there's a picture on a small table across from the toilet. It's him again, staring at me in the picture while I'm taking a dump. And no one mentioned the pictures to him, also I'm 100% certain it wasn't a troll or practical joke. In short, I went to someone's home and it was basically an enormous shrine to themselves. I was visiting one friend and we were about to go buy a 30 rack at a nearby liquor store. I tell him that we need to stop by an ATM so I can pick up some cash to pay. He just turns and looks at me and goes, "Don't worry about it, we can just go to the money drawer." This kid's family literally kept a drawer full of $20 bills in the kitchen that you could just walk up and grab whenever you needed something. It was pretty surreal. When I was in college, I played the drums in a band and we'd often practice at the guitar player's house, because his parents didn't care about the noise. The family was weird and the house smelled, but the thing that got me was the filth. There was always dog doo somewhere, and I don't think they ever flushed or cleaned a toilet. All of this was considered normal to them. Then one day the guy that played guitar walked over to the corner of the room and went wee-wee on the floor. I was stunned. He wasn't drunk or anything like that. This was normal to him. His parents didn't care either. It was just how they did things. My friend refuses to vacuum and her carpet is covered in a layer of loose hair. I met this kid in 3rd grade and he seemed normal. Cool kid. Funny. Anyway, I went to his house to work on a school project and his mother was a hoarder. Worst of the worst. She could have had a marathon of the hoarders on her own home. I guess the kid thought it was normal because he had been living in it since he was born. He was kind of disheartened when he came to my house and didn't have to climb over mounds of trash to take a leak. Dog crap. Old, crusty, all alongside the fresh and smelly pit bull crap all over the living room, while he'd just sit and watch TV in the room as if it wasn't even there. Yes, this was my house. Yes, this was my roommate. I'd pick it up, let the dog out to try housebreaking it. He did nothing. As I packed up my stuff to move out, I stopped picking up the dog doo, thinking that he'd man up. Nope, I had to step around these massive landmines as I moved out. This is like my 3rd submission for the question, and it's become clear to me I know some pretty dysfunctional people. Oh boy, pal, I don't normally judge the people who submit here. That's for our other channel, Am I the Jerk? But maybe you need to start getting new friends. Unless all of these crazies in your life are also super affluent and paying for everything, then maybe you can keep one of them around. A white carpeted kitchen. Once when I was a kid, I was invited to stay over for dinner at a friend's house. My friend's mother poured a large quantity of ketchup into a cereal bowl, which the entire family all casually dipped their fingers into and licked throughout the meal. This sounds like something out of the Twilight Zone. They were testing you. I was invited over to a friend's house for dinner for the first time. Now, for staging purposes, they all sit around the living room to eat as a family. They have these 2 large dogs, so I asked beforehand, as I always do, what are the rules with dogs and food? Am I supposed to ignore begging? Can I give them a bite? What kind of stuff can I feed them? Do they have a trick to get some? They tell me that not only can I feed them whatever I want, but that all plates are given to the dogs after the meal, and the dogs would hassle you if you took the plate straight to the kitchen. So I finished my meal, which was decent, and I laid down my plate for the dogs. They clean it up quite nicely. I pick it up to the kitchen and I ask if it goes to the sink or the dishwasher. They said to put it back in the cabinet because the dogs clean it good enough to eat off of. I laughed at the joke and then kind of reiterated my question. It wasn't a joke. My friend walked into the kitchen and put her plate, her boyfriend's plate, and her mum and dad's plate all in the cabinet with the other, quote, clean dishes. I could have been sick. I dropped all contact with them. That was just too much. In short, their dishwashing was done exclusively by the dogs. This was when I was a kid. I was at my friend's house and her mum got us some orange juice with our lunch. When we finished eating, she took the remaining juice from the cups and poured it back into the container. Even as a kid, I thought it was disgusting. Kids in the home going to the fridge, grabbing a stick of butter, unwrapping it, taking a big old bite, rewrapping it, and putting it back. Went to a party in college and the kid living there had boxes of Cat Fancy magazine catalogued by month and year all over his room. When I asked about it, the dude just shrugged and said, "Yeah, I'm into cats." I was just too nervous to ask more. They keep a sewing needle and pin stuck into their hand towel. I found it by reaching to use the hand towel to dry my hands and putting the pin through my finger. I was like, "What the frick, guys?" And they just shrugged as in, "You don't have sharp objects hiding in your towels?" They then went on to explain that it was used for draining pimples. What's the most cringeworthy thing you've ever seen an ungrateful jerk do? My sister once started crying and locked herself in her room after my parents spent the last of their money buying her a Game Boy, because the Game Boy was grey and not pink. Same thing happened to me a few years ago. My sister wanted a laptop. I was in college, but had a little bit of Christmas money saved up, so I decided to get her something. I did a bunch of reading about what was the best kind of used laptop to buy, and ended up getting her an IBM ThinkPad T51. I formatted it, installed Windows XP, and went down to the school bookstore and got a student copy of Office to install on it. I was talking to my mum the next day and mentioned what I was getting her. My mum says, "Oh, well, she really wanted one of those new pink laptops. You should have gotten her one of those." I explained that I didn't have the hundreds to spend on a brand new Dell for her, but this was a perfectly nice IBM that would do great for her first year of college. She was graduating high school that year. Later that day, I got a call from my sister where she proceeded to scream at me and demand I get her the pink Dell she wanted. Screw that. I sold it on eBay and ended up making some money on it. I don't remember what I got her that year, but it was something cheap, crappy, and from Walmart. She dealt without a laptop until she was desperate, and I gave her an even crappier one than the IBM that a friend had given to me that was destined for his trash can. My aunt gave a small birthday party for my cousin, who was turning 25, last fall. He got really upset and angry because she bought him a pair of black skateboarding shoes instead of brown ones. She tried to calmly explain that she couldn't find any brown ones, but he wasn't having it. I almost slapped him. My sister was so unhappy with the car my parents got her that she tried to sell it every time it was parked. That was back before cell phones, so the only number she had to give was the home phone, which my parents always answered if they were there. They got her back by moving the car one day and telling her that someone bought it, but since it was their car, they got the money for it. Oh God, maybe they should have actually sold it and she could just take that as a lesson. I think most of us were ungrateful jerks for at least a period of our childhoods, but I think teenage me would have known that the limit to acceptable behavior ended several kilometers before measures like this. One of my friends received a car for their 18th birthday from their grandparents. A free car. Their response was to break down in tears, saying how much they hated it because it was an old man car, and then absolutely refused to drive it ever. That's about when I had an epiphany and wanted that person out of my life immediately. After my mum died, my stepdad took some of the insurance money and bought his daughter a brand new SUV. I heard she threw a screaming fit in the driveway because it wasn't a sports car. By the way, me and my other siblings got nothing at all from him. Of course, now she's 35 and still lives with her dad and still screams and whines for everything she wants, so I guess karma is a witch, and so is my stepsister. I built my stepson a gaming computer, helped him set it up and got some games loaded up on it for him so we could game together and bond some more. As soon as I had it all set up, he told me to get out of his room and closed the door. I spent 4 months saving and buying parts for it one at a time. My parents got her a DS and it got stolen a week later. I found it as I was taking out the trash and placed it back in her room. A day after that, I found it in pieces in the trash and I screamed at that witch for an hour. I didn't think to tell my parents about it at the time, I was just furious. I had this issue with a group of children I'll allow to remain anonymous. They complained about their Christmas gifts being either too cheap, too lame, or one of many other things. Their father returned all of the gifts to the store and bought something for himself and their mother. The following year, they were very humble and thankful for the gifts they received. Similar story, we had a family friend that was like an uncle to us. He had kids that were much older than us, and one Christmas they made a huge deal about the lameness of their presents. What does the father do? He packs up all the presents in his car and donates them to a local orphanage. Every Christmas, my in-laws ask me to cook dinner for them. They always want steaks, and I always make sure to cook them exactly as ordered. I've been cooking for years at a restaurant and now at the firehouse, and I know my way around a steak. Every year I stand out in the cold and grill their dinner while they sit inside and enjoy the fire. Every year they insist that their steaks are pink. Every year I prove to them that the lighting in the dining room is pinkish, and if they'd simply come outside and view their steaks in the natural light, they'd know. So then I go back outside and grill their steaks until they turn to charcoal to make them happy, and then every year I have to listen to 6 months of complaints about how freaking tough the steaks were. My 16-year-old cousin whined about how our grandparents only gave her £100 for Christmas. I informed her that they're pensioners and she should shut the frick up. Here's one of way too many. There was an early morning cardiac arrest call. We worked on this guy furiously, got a pulse back, everything went right. Good call. Guy gets into the catheter lab right away and walks out of the hospital alive a couple of weeks later. Then his cranky wife sends us a bill for carpet cleaning and says that we tracked in mud on her carpet when we were saving her husband's life. A girl in one of my classes in high school got in all angry and crabby one morning. The teacher asked her what was wrong, and she began by saying her daddy promised her a Mercedes-Benz for her birthday, but she wasn't going to get one after all. At first I thought, okay, fine, her dad was just messing with her and she didn't realize it. After a few minutes of, oh my god, it's not fair, I hate my life, she explained why she wasn't getting the Benz after all. Apparently her mother didn't approve of her having a sporty Benz as her first car. The mum was afraid it would encourage the daughter to drive recklessly. So the mum got the dad to buy a brand new Cadillac CTS with all the bells, dings and whistles instead. Minor upshot, not even a month later she totaled the car. As far as I know, her parents fixed it, but kept it for themselves after that. In short, girl who only has a driver's permit gets crazy upset because she got a brand new Cadillac instead of a Benz for her birthday. My grandma spent a whole frickin' year, knitting me, my brother and sister sweaters. Very nice sweaters in our favorite colors. My brother looked at this and said, "Why would you waste your time making this? I don't even wear sweaters. I'm more of a hoodie guy." He was 18 at the time, and that makes it even worse. Ungrateful jerk. Hi, narrator here. So, let's all form a mob and go and find this guy. I will and have accepted many crimes in my time listening to the antics of people on this channel, but I will not stand for disrespecting your sweet old grandma. My niece is 14. For the better part of 5 years, my parents, her grandparents, have been raising her because her parents are deadbeats. Because of what her past was like, witnessing awful behavior at home, lots of emotional problems, she is spoiled rotten. Last year for Christmas, my parents bought her a $400 camera that's nicer than any of us have ever had. This year for Christmas, she spent the entire day complaining about how terrible her camera was and how it takes awful pictures and how she deserves a new one. Another story, my parents gave her a used iPhone, she's 14. This was a few months ago with an OtterBox case. She took the case off because it was ugly and then promptly carelessly dropped it on the ground, shattering the screen. She blamed it on my parents, saying they should have gotten her a case for it. I have endless stories about her. She also broke her nice laptop by being careless and whined every day for a new one. I've never wanted to whack a kid as much as I have her at times. And I feel like I should add that, like all situations, it's a complicated one. She's had a difficult past, which is no excuse for her behavior, but it is why my parents spent the better part of her earlier years giving her lots of loving attention. Even as young as 7 and 8, she's been very depressed, on antidepressants, and in therapy. She's made leaps and bounds in improvement, but still struggles with low self-esteem. She's also a teenager. A lot of her behavior can be attributed to the way she was raised until my parents took her in. My parents are doing some things to curb her behavior, and most of the time she's an engaging, intelligent, grateful kid. But she still has moments where we're all just dumbfounded at what comes out of her mouth. My parents have realized that they may have taken things too far with the material gifts and are working to change things. They're both in their 60s and are still supporting my sister and other niece and nephew, as well as raising my 14-year-old and 10-year-old nieces while working full-time. I've even taken a step back sometimes to remind myself of how complicated life can be. My brother and I were raised by a single mother, our father having died when I was 4, and my brother 8. After he died, we moved from where we lived to where my grandparents live to be closer to family. One day, my brother and I were apparently just acting like brats. I don't remember it, I was young, maybe 7 at the time. We wouldn't help my mother clean up or something. Well, my mother told my brother to watch me for a little bit, and then she left for my grandma's, 3 minutes away. I learned later, from my brother, who was told by my grandma, that my mother left that day so she could sit at my grandma's and cry. She just cried about how she couldn't take everything we were doing. I've never felt worse about anything in my whole life, and I was probably 8 years old when I found out. You know, some of these stories make me feel way better about my value as a daughter. This one is about my sister's dad. I was in 6th grade and my sister was in 8th. We only had 4 classes for extracurricular activities and she had already taken all of them, as they'd only lasted 3 weeks. So her teacher, and eventually mine, Mrs. McCulley, started teaching her American Sign Language during 6th period instead of what she usually did during that hour. My sister worked hard and became an impressive translator using sign for her age. Mrs. McCulley scheduled a special performance for her to debut her skill using 8th grade graduation ceremonies. She signed "You Raise Me Up" and it was beautiful. She fumbled a little bit during the middle of the song but smiled and mouthed sorry to the audience and continued on flawlessly. After the ceremony was over, her father walked up to her and said, "Well, you messed that up, didn't you?" Instead of being proud and grateful to have a talented child, he snubbed her. She was so ashamed and embarrassed, she never did sign again. She could have had a promising career teaching it, and he messed it up. I hate him for that. I try to encourage her to get back into it. She has a 3-year-old son, turning 4 in June, and I'm trying to convince her that he'd benefit from learning to communicate using ASL. She still has contact with her dad. I have nothing to do with him. He's a jerk and always will be. She really believes one day he'll change, and she's crazy, but I guess he is her dad. Also, his girlfriend is pregnant. He's bringing another child into this world to mess up. Yay. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My cousin, who's 16, ran away from home because her mum wouldn't buy her a Droid razor. They couldn't afford it. Her mum was working 2 jobs just to support her. She was only gone for a few days, but just long enough to get pregnant. A girl at my high school put a brick on her gas pedal and crashed her brand new Mustang into a concrete wall at school. All because the car she got for her 16th birthday was the wrong color. And she kept bragging that she'd get a new one. "I'm just teaching my parents a lesson." She got expelled and arrested. After that, I don't know. It was 2 months from graduation. I suppose this is more of a funny one because we all need it. One day I got a little pedal go-kart for Christmas. I was so excited. It was amazing, not nearly as excited as my little sister, who got a Barbie playhouse. But she didn't want that anymore, she wanted my go-kart. She wailed and screamed for 2 hours until I gave in and let her have a go. And she pretty much monopolized it for the whole of Christmas, while I made a fort out of the leftover boxes and wrapping paper and threw walnuts into the fire and at my dad. It was fun. Thank you for this little dose of positivity in the face of overwhelming horridness and humanity. I'm sure your sister grew out of it, although I must protest the wasting and busting of good nuts. When I was a little kid, my grandmother had gotten me Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for the NES as a birthday present. I was turning like 4 or 5. It was the one thing I really wanted. I loved the Ninja Turtles, and what better than a video game about them? Except, she put it in a box for a toaster. I assumed to throw me off from the fact that she was getting me a video game. So there I was, 4 or 5 years old, and I unwrap a toaster. From the grandmother who always spoils the grandkid, getting them whatever they want. I remember the disappointment that washed over me immediately. Why would my grandma get me a toaster, was all I could think. It was too much grief. I started to cry and bawl my eyes out. I didn't calm down until they opened the box and showed that inside she had indeed gotten me the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles video game. On a related note, holy frick was that game hard for a 5-year-old. I know a friend whose mum absolutely spoiled her. Her mum, despite being disabled and with very limited income, does everything she possibly can for her only daughter, buys her phones, expensive clothes, whatever she wants, and most recently, a new car. Heck, she even does her homework for her, since my friend is D'ing or failing all of her classes, simply because she hates school and can't be bothered, even though she says she wants to go to college. All in all, this girl is blessed with an awesome frickin' mom. My friend, however, usually doesn't have many pleasant things to say about her mum unless it's on Facebook. So apparently there's this fair that they go to as a family every year, and her dad had recently died. So it would be the first year without him. Her mum brings it up and my awful ingrate friend point blank says she's not going to let her mum go. Why? Because she only wants her jerk of a boyfriend there. Her mum, who was on the verge of tears, said, "But we go every year." It broke my heart. My spoiled teenage cousin almost earned himself a punch in the crotch last Christmas. We were talking about what we each got for Christmas that year since we're both gamers. I was excited that my wife had gotten me Star Wars: The Old Republic. He got a bunch of games, a new 360 since his old one was, quote, dirty and scratched, from his nerd raging. It came with Kinect, a Fender guitar, a new drum set, an iPhone 4 to replace his stupid 3GS, and since he'd just turned 16, his parents gave them their old 2009 Toyota SUV. The thing was sweet, fully loaded and beautiful. I was like, damn, dude, that's one heck of a haul. His reply, Yeah, right, that car is freaking gay. My buddy at school's parents got him a Honda S2000, a Burton snowboard, and him and his girlfriend new iPhones. Plus, they got to go on a cruise for Christmas. I told my parents what car I wanted, they're just cheap. I gave him a verbal beatdown the likes of which he needed to hear, rubbing in just how rough his life is, all the while he's rolling his eyes. This encounter, as well as the rest in this story grouping, are an extremely effective form of birth control. I was at a UN camp for high schoolers. This girl was whining about how her 16th got ruined because the BMW convertible she got from her parents was yellow and not red. As a kid from a poor public school, I just wanted to punch her in the nose. It wasn't the most expensive of gifts, but my mum bought me a sweatshirt I really wanted for Christmas. I was in my scene kid stage and I wanted my clothes to fit tight, so I told my mum to get me a medium even though she'd normally buy me a large. Well, I opened up my gift, got excited when I saw that it was a sweatshirt, and then immediately threw a fit when I saw the sweatshirt was a large. I basically threw it on the couch and went, "Great, well now I'm never going to wear this." I acted like a jerk the rest of the day and made it a point to not even try the sweatshirt on. Eventually, I put it on in my room and it fit perfectly. I thought about the fact that I'd yelled at my mum for something that she bought out of love for me and didn't need to get me in the first place. I felt pretty frickin' ashamed of myself and I gave her a sob-filled apology. I'm always grateful anytime anyone gives me any sort of gift now, even if it's something I wouldn't want in a million years. All that can come to mind is my girlfriend, soon perhaps to be ex. She cooked dinner on Friday night, and Saturday after she had left for work, I stuck behind and cleaned her entire apartment. I washed all of the pots and pans. It was Italian, so it required a lot to cook, and then I went on to clean her whole place. This morning she snapped at me for washing the dishes twice. I didn't know the ones in the washer were already clean, and then I told her, "Wow, I guess I shouldn't have washed all those pots in your apartment too. I have spinal surgery tomorrow, Monday, and 2 severely herniated discs in my back, and it hurt a lot to do it, but I like trying to help her. I've taken her out for countless nice meals, which she ruins with her negativity. The waitress will ask her, 'Do you want another drink?' and she'll respond in a witchy tone, 'I don't know. Do I?' And the waitress will just give her a look of confusion. I'm tired of having to apologize for her and leave huge tips because of her C-word behavior. I have surgery on Monday, and I CC her on the email to my parents, which just states the time and place my parents are taking me, and all she said that night was, "Why did you send me this email?" I said I thought you'd want to know the details, and she said, I'm not waking up at 6:30. Frick. I'm ranting. So the narrator is certainly missing a lot of the positive events and nuanced dynamics and complications of this relationship, but still feels pretty secure in saying, dump her. My little sister was 16 and already had a very active bedroom life with her boyfriend, but wouldn't tell my mum. She calls me one night and tells me that they ran out of Johnnies and decided to do the deed anyway. I told her that she needs to get Plan B or take some of my birth control. I looked it up and you can take 4 of the kinds of pills I had to be as effective as Plan B. I didn't have $55 to give her for Plan B, but I did have the extra birth control pills that she could have. I told her I'd drive them over right then, because the sooner she took them, the better. My sister agreed with me, so at midnight I left to drive across town to give her some emergency contraception. As I'm pulling into my parents' drive, I get a call from my older sister. My younger sister had called her and convinced her to spend $55 on Plan B. The same thing I was bringing her, except free, and to call me and to tell me not to worry about it. So my older sister shells out $55 for pills and asks my little sister if she has the money to pay her back. Little sister tells her no, so the older sis told younger sis that she can babysit a couple of nights for her to pay off the debt. Fast forward a week later, my younger sister is watching my niece. As per the secret between sisters birth control debt payment plan, my niece's dad comes to pick her up and they leave. My dad asks my sister if they paid her for babysitting, and my little sister says, "No, my older sister didn't pay me anything for babysitting." My dad calls my older sister and tears her out about how she's a cheap piece of crap sister for not paying younger sis for babysitting. In short, my little sister is an absolute C-word. My older sister absolutely cracked it, Australian for had a hissy fit, when she had to use her Centrelink money, the government money, to come interstate when my dad was in hospital because, wait for it, he didn't die. She basically said, I spent all of that money and he didn't even die. I lost my passive-aggressive crap and have barely spoken to her since. We've had a few disagreements over the years. So far, from all of these stories I've heard, I've figured out that teenagers get expensive cars somehow. I'm 24 and I can't afford to own a car with insurance and gas money. How do these 15 to 18-year-olds afford it? I can understand a parent buying a car, but dropping a couple of $100 to $1,000 on gas money and still having ungrateful children? I'm going to look at kittens or something to cheer myself up. A woman I worked with bought iPads for her children for Christmas. They both got mad and refused the gifts. The daughter started crying and locked herself in her room for the rest of the day. They wanted to go to New York City, not have a stupid computer. Okay, maybe some context would help. The daughter wanted to go to New York City to do shopping and to see Broadway plays. They'd already been at least once before for cultural reasons, and the son wanted a car. Both were in their very early 20s at the time. Also, we live in North Carolina, so it's not like we can just pop into town for the day. I'm gonna just go ahead and stop reading these comments in fear of getting too angry and throwing my laptop across the room. Professionals. How have ignorant idiots misinterpreted or minimized your job? My wife described my job to me as tootling around on the computer all day. I'm the sole database administrator for my entire company. Oh boy, every conversation I have when people ask what I do. I say I'm the system administrator for a university, and inevitably they answer, "So, you fix computers?" "Sure." At school, my niece told her class that her dad plays golf and drinks beer for a job. He's a doctor that left the medical field to work in consulting. My ex of 5 years described my job as, "All you do all day is go diving." Oil rigs don't build themselves, and making a dive to 200 feet to install a pipeline is no small task. Nor is doing mid-water work on installing anodes on a caisson, but she never complained about the money I made. I heard about an incident a couple of weeks ago in the North Sea where a guy got cut off from umbilical for 45 minutes. He hugged the pipeline and passed out on an 8-minute oxygen supply. They managed to revive him after that. Your job is terrifying. Respect. My best friend called me a pipetting slave monkey. I'm a genetics PhD. She is absolutely right, though. Many people think I'm only a kind of butcher, killing animals all day and extracting their brains. I do preclinical research in the field of Alzheimer's disease. Every time I tell someone what I do, they respond with, "Oh, you're the guy that parks the plane." I'm an air traffic controller, tower control. Ugh, dressing up like a working girl. I dress up as Disney princesses and fairies with other girls, and I visit children's birthday parties and mostly terminally ill children. I think if people use this particular criticism, it raises a lot more questions about their free time and bedroom lives than it does about your job. What are they paying people to do in their own time? I got told the only reason I wanted to be a theater techie was so that I wouldn't have to get up early in the morning. I really wanted to call and wake that person up at 6:30 in the morning yesterday when I was unloading a truck in the rain. I'm the only girl at an IT consulting company. My grandmother told me it was a good thing because this way I have a better chance of sleeping my way to the top. As a male in the IT field with mainly female bosses, your grandmother is either very wrong or very right, as I can't get promoted no matter what I do. I'm currently getting my PhD in ecology. My grandfather said he couldn't wait for me to get home so I could landscape his yard. A couple of family members have made comments about how I don't have to do any work and that I just sign the checks. I own an IT company. I've tried to explain that I typically put in 40 to 60 hours a week, and that if I screw up at my job, a whole lot of people won't even have a job to come to, but they still don't get it. On a similar note, at my old job, my coworkers and I, engineers, used to make fun of the technical lead on a project because about 75% of his time was talking with the customers. We'd say things like, "Oh, you're just looking at graphs and meeting with the customers again, eh?" "Yeah, those emails won't write themselves, better get cracking." Sipping martinis with the bigwigs again? Real tough job you've got there. Then he started CCing us on the emails and including us in the meetings. We stopped making fun of him. A policeman whose life I had the pleasure of saving referred to me and my fellow EMTs as an overpriced taxi service. We'll see who's laughing next time he gets shot. I'm just kidding, I'll still treat him. I'm a video game designer, and I will never hear the end of it. Apparently, I just look at the computer and games are made. The best response I got came from a cabbie. "So, what do you do?" "I'm a game designer, I make video games." "What, they're made?" No, they grow on trees. We just harvest them. Sometimes we say that the pipe fitters on site are plumbers and the civil engineers are rebar layers. They don't like it. I work at one of the top recording studios in the city, one of 2 employees in its 40 years that didn't go to school for audio engineering. I got my education for free while I was getting paid. I didn't come into the job blind, I got hired based on what I could do and had already done. I was making a real salary and living in my own place, while my friends were barely halfway through university. My grandma won't accept that I can have a good job without having gone to school, and she doesn't understand what I could possibly do for sound in television ads, movies, and video games. She tries to convince me to go back to school every time I see her. Her new husband said I should become a security guard. We should swap grandmas. I'm still working on my master's, and finally, after working full-time and school part-time, I'm in a situation where I can go to school full-time and finish this thing. Since then, all I hear from my grandmother is, "Do you have a job yet?" or "Get a job." She sees education for women as something you do when you're young and fairly useless after adulthood has started. So I feel your reverse pain. I'm an on-call locksmith that works graveyard, so literally my job consists of sitting around my house and getting paid waiting for the phone to ring. It's a pretty easy job, the only drawback is that I have to stay up until 7 a.m. The other day my girlfriend was giving me crap about what I did all night by saying, "All you do is smoke green herb and tickle your pickle while you're at work. Oh, and that Reddit website too." She's 100% accurate. I used to be a hospital microbiologist. I get a lot of, "Oh, so like all you do is take blood?" Yeah, sure, because we needed a 4-year degree to learn how to take blood, and infectious diseases identify themselves with their own cute little micro-driver's license. The kicker? I suck at taking blood. I get called a glorified babysitter all the time. I'm a kindergarten teacher. My wife thinks she's hilarious when I say that I had a rough day as a VMware engineer by responding, "Did you get tired from all the waiting and clicking?" You just touch people for money. I'm a massage therapist. I'm a bank teller, and while at Subway last week, the guy making my sandwich told me I have it so easy and that I just give people money all day. I wanted to say, no, you just sit here and make sandwiches all day, and people get a lot more upset when there's a problem with their life savings rather than when they don't get enough mustard on their sub. This might be one of those grass is always greener situations. I feel like bank tellers are a little higher on the social pecking order at least, but then again, you probably have to deal with stuffier and more dismissive clientele than you would at Subway. Then again, I'd rather do anything than work in hospitality for a living again, so I'll try getting screamed at by rich jerks any day. I would never purposefully trivialize my husband's job, but when people ask me what he does, I usually say he's in IT. He hates this. He's a computer programmer and software developer. The thing is, most people I know don't really know what a programmer or developer does, but they know IT means he works with computers. I've actively been trying to catch myself and now say computer programmer when someone asks. Better than my grandma at least. When people ask what he does, she says, "Computers." But hey, she's 80, so that's actually good for her. My ex-girlfriend didn't appreciate my business. I own and run a poker league. We have over 400 players each season. I have 4 part-time employees. I do all the accounting, marketing, and web updating myself. Because our games are at bars, she thought all I did was hang out with friends and drink beer all night. She said she didn't feel I was challenged enough. The challenge was paying for all of our bills while she didn't make any money. Play games all day. I work in QA. We have to break a game, not play it. There's a different mentality to it. You play a game to enjoy the experience. If you're QA, you're interfacing with that game to understand and to learn its imperfections within its code. We also have to then record our findings. It's like practical science experiments in a universe someone else has created, and you're confined to one space. In that space, you do all as you may do to make something happen that's not supposed to happen. It's awfully repetitive and can make you never want to play the most awesome games ever again. Like, for example, entering and leaving a certain section of the level multiple times for hours on end. There are multiple different ways, over and over again, documenting the outcomes and identifying where the glitches and bugs may exist. I heard it truly is like taking all the fun out of a game. When do I get to shoot stuff? Never. Keep walking in circles and tell me when you see any clipping. My girlfriend told me, "You just play on the internet all day." I work as an industrial programmer and ordering systems administrator. I work in an office for the Department of Transport. I have nothing whatsoever to do with the operational side of things like selling tickets, running buses and trains. However, after 3 years, I still get odd moments from my mum when there are transport delays that suggest she thinks I can get called out to help direct buses or some crap. I've tried to explain what I do, but I don't really think it's stuck. My dad said that all I do at work, KFC, is serve people chicken. Get lost, Bunt, I wash the trays too. Pharmacy. Why does it take 20 minutes to count out 30 tablets? Says the irate customer. Well, I also have to enter the RX, check that it doesn't interact with any other med you're on, make sure it's the proper dose and medication for your problem, make sure you're taking the medication correctly, deal with the rejection from your insurance company because the doctor wrote for an obscenely expensive substance, count the medication, and then double-check everything I just did. I also have to stop working on yours to answer questions about over-the-counter medications and responding to, "Where is the bread?" or "What wiper blades do I need for my car?" And I apologize, but there were 30 patients in front of you. Now that it's filled, I need to come talk to you and ensure that you understand everything, since your doctor most likely didn't tell you it all. It's not fast food pharmacy. I have 8 years of school to be able to do this. I hold your life in my hands. My dad filmed a video of my sister massaging a horse. She's a failed horse massage therapist. And then he told me my job was easy and he didn't see why people pay me so much. I'm a high-end surgical videographer. I have to intricately know the ins and outs of dozens of types of surgeries, and frequently I have to know how to do it better than the surgeon I'm filming. Yes, I frequently see the world's best surgeons make mistakes or take extreme and flippant risks with patients. Whenever I tell people I have an undergraduate degree in psychology, they ask if I can read people's minds. I instantly peg them as a moron. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My friend, who's a nurse, suggested that my job as a care assistant was pretty much not needed as nurses really do all the proper work. All we apparently do is change the patients. When a resident or patient is dying in my work, it's not the nurse that sits with them or their family offering comfort. It's not the nurse who sits with them until they've stopped breathing, nor is it the nurse who washes and dresses the body after they've passed. In fact, other than turning on oxygen or occasionally giving out tablets and handing out important-looking reports, our nurses don't interact with the residents or patients much at all. Our nurses can't even tell the family what their mum or dad has eaten all day, how they slept, or what he did before bed, without a care assistant reporting this in information. I'm not saying that nurses aren't needed, by the way, but both jobs are as important as the other. And look, I can't overstate this enough, I don't hate nurses. I've had some very positive experiences while as a patient in the ICU myself, and a lot of my friends are nursing grads. I'm also aware in hospital the nursing situation is very different. This is my reaction to a comment made by a nurse I know, and my experience in my workplace. So please, if you're a nurse, don't take offense. I have an undergraduate degree in psychology and I work as an IT project manager. People can never quite understand how the two go together. Motivation? Understanding what needs to be done? Teams of people working together to achieve a singular goal? Effective communication on multiple levels? Psychology? Huh? I just don't see the connection there. I work for the US Air Force. My job is a munitions inspector. I have to inspect all outbound and inbound munitions, as well as a periodic inspection on all munitions in the bomb dump. The fact that I work with millions of dollars of high-value explosives daily means nothing to my wife. I've seen people get seriously injured on the job, as well as heard horror stories of fingers being shot off by 20mm or people burning to death from a flare mishap. I go home some days exhausted and covered in residue, and my wife just hands me my son and says, "Ugh, I need a break from him." As if I didn't just work with explosives all day. She wakes up at 8:30, I have to be at work for 6:45. He takes at least 2 one-hour naps a day. And sometimes I might go home for lunch to find her either passed out on the couch or watching Family Feud or The Price is Right. Look, it sounds like you do indeed have a very serious job, but it honestly sounds like you both need to get a healthy amount of respect for the work the other puts into running your household, because parenthood is no joke either. I work from home. That doesn't mean I sleep in until 11 a.m. and sit around watching TV all day. It means that when I'm working on a project, I work almost around the clock because I live and work in the same place. When I don't have a project, I'm incredibly busy catching up on all of the housework and errands that get neglected when I do have a project. We have a 110-year-old wooden house, so yeah, there are always things to be done. Now excuse me while I return to stripping the paint on the molding in the toilet so that I can repaint it. I'm a consultant. My mum described my job as talking to people about stuff. My girlfriend told me that I hang around with the guys all day and shoot the crap. It can't be that hard. I'm a construction worker for the union. My position requires climbing heights of more than 90 feet, scaling from walls in a body harness with about 80 pounds of tools attached to me. I'm consistently told that I just drive around all day, that it can't be that hard or tiring. I'm a fricking truck driver. I have to deal with every idiot they give a driver's license to. She said I just sit around and play on the computer looking at those pictures with the captions, which I'm a Redditor. They said that all I do is sit around waiting to push a button every 108 minutes. My dad hates that I don't work in some form of IT. He hates that I'm, quote, wasting my life away as a salesman. I run an award-winning business that has watched nearly all of its competitors shutter their doors in recent years while we've flourished. I've been flown around the country on trips, vacations, generally non-working trips, by my vendors for top shop awards, sales growth awards, etc. I have a long list of employees that return each year because they love working here, and a longer list of people who are dying to work here. Sales is only about 25% of my actual job. I love selling and jump on the floor when I can, but it's not that often. Since he likes to generalize my job so much, I refer to him as a repairman. He repairs computers, so he's a repairman. I've got two bosses. One is amazing and knows just how hard I do work. The other said I make things look pretty. I arrange all the merchandise in a party and crafts store with 2 sales floors, often relocating entire sections to allow for seasonal changeovers. When people ask me if I'm still a physiotherapist, they do that kind of massagey thing with their hands. No, you idiots, I'm not a massage therapist. It's not even close. If someone asks Mum, I'm the IT guy at college. Technically, my job is called AV, MM, and IT presenter. They butchered 3 jobs to build my job, so it's a jack of all trades. Hardware, software, lecturer, heck, anything with a plug sometimes. My mum still thinks I'm in IT. I lost my job after September 11th, and I've been working a desk job at a legal firm since 2003. I'm still behind a desk and still working with computers, so as far as she's concerned, I'm in IT. I'm a professional youth soccer coach and part-time referee. I can't tell you how often I get asked what my other real job is. I'm a graphic designer for 3 large clients, and my friend has always said my specialty is basically coloring. There are days I want to slap them. I work at McDonald's. Everyone thinks I just flip burgers for a living, which is false. The burgers are cooked on both sides at once and don't need to be flipped when they're cooking. Audio and video integrator here. I design systems for video conferencing and presentation systems for Fortune 500 companies. I also develop the software to control all of these systems, AMX and Crestron. My family thinks I sell TVs. I'm an MI analyst. Most people don't know what that is, so they just say, he messes around with computers, but if you need help with Excel formula, he'll do it for you. There was a project manager at my last job who said I was Neo from the Matrix because I could look at pages of code and instantly understand it. I thought that was pretty awesome. Even altered my SAS preferences to display green code on a black background, but it looked pretty horrendous, so I switched it back eventually. I have a BS in mathematics. My father always used to introduce me by saying, "This is my son, he's in school for math. He can count really, really high." When I was the head line cook in an 8-person kitchen, my dad wouldn't let me cook for the family at home because according to him, all I did at work was cook French fries. He refused to believe that any employer would ever put me in a position of authority over anyone else. When I stacked hay as a summer job in my younger years, I'd come home every night exhausted and my mother would angrily tell me that I shouldn't be tired because throwing grass, as she called it, was easy. Added to that, she convinced my dad I was on green herb, and that's why I was tired all the time. I'm a musician/audio engineer by trade, which really means I tootle around on Reddit all day. I mean, the narrator feels called out. I'm also technically an audio engineer who is on Reddit all day, but I'd like to point out that's rather specific for the job I do on this channel. But yeah, what this person's joking about is actually accurate for me. For centuries, men have grossly minimized domestic work, hence the term the invisible economy. I'm a professional musician. A lot of people think all I do is smoke green herb, do white snow, and drink a lot and then play a bit and party some more. But I don't smoke green herb at all. Haha, I get the opposite of job minimization. Half of my church thinks that Air Force Reserve Officer Training Corps means active duty Air Force service. No, Aunt Audrey, I'm not stationed anywhere yet. No, Pastor Ray, I don't have my AFSC yet. I have a year and a half to go. About 2 months before I graduated college, I was able to snag a job at the company my dad owns, being the administrative assistant. Obviously, this is a bottom-rung position in the business world, but you have to start somewhere to move your way up. I got my foot in the door because my dad owns the company, but I was hired and I'm supervised by a different person completely. Getting this position was a huge accomplishment for me. I was at a party my friend had invited me to when I was asked what I do for a living by one of my friend's friends. I was finally excited to answer the question because I'd finally started a professional career, like not being a server or cashier. My friend, however, didn't even let me answer and instead interrupted me by saying, "Oh, she just works for her dad." I still feel upset by this comment she made. She completely undermined my accomplishment and my job. I've since moved my way up in my career and now do HR for the company. I may have gotten into the company because of my dad, but I worked my way to where I am because of me. My girlfriend said that my organic chemistry work was just drawing pretty pictures and arrows. I'm a senior network security engineer for a global firm. We have several federal sites. Security clearances, you know. One of my uncles told me to keep at it and someday you'll be making good money. My salary was 6 figures when he told me this. I'm earning a Bachelor of Fine Arts. He goes to trade school, said my dad. I mean, that's just wishful thinking on his part. Okay, residential advisors, what's the most painful parent-student separation you've ever seen? There was one helicopter parenting situation. I'd left my phone number at a desk for a desk attendant one night I was on duty. A resident saw this, my personal number, and gave it to his dad. The dad calls me and immediately starts yelling that there's a leak in his son's bathroom ceiling and that wee-wee has been leaking through it. Okay, how long? For a week. Has he done anything about it? Notified anyone? You're the RA, you're supposed to know. The dad chews me out for 10 more minutes. I check out the kid's room. He's got towels all over the bathroom floor. I look up at the ceiling. Super light leak and definitely not wee-wee. I tell him so and tell him to file a maintenance request. He demands that I do it for him. I point him in the right direction, but he's a big boy, so no. He demands to know if what I know is water is actually wee-wee. I casually ask why he let what he thought was number 1 leak into his apartment for a whole week. As I go to leave, he tells me he's going to demand that the university pay for his ruined, read wet, towels, and he wants my contact info to file a complaint. I nod, give him the info, and I leave. His dad calls me a day later, but I'd spoken to my boss the night before. Hi, I'm calling on behalf of… Yes, I know, sir, but I'm an RA and I handle students' problems. If he wants my attention, he can call me himself, otherwise I don't report to you. Have a nice day, sir. Delete my number. The mum thought she'd be able to live with the daughter in the dorms. Upon being told that wasn't possible, she withdrew the daughter and they both went back home. I've been an RA for 3 years now. Every year, without fail, there's always that family that helps their kid move in on Sunday and then stays the entire freshman orientation week until school actually starts the next Monday. Except the freshmen obviously have activities to go through all throughout the week, so the parents, who can't accompany their kids to the activities, either sit around the kids' room or in the lobby of the dorm. It drives me crazy. Last year was particularly bad, with an entire family of mom, dad, siblings, cousins, all camped out in the dorm's lobby for a week. The university seemed to pick up on the fact that this is a problem, because this year they introduced a new event into the orientation week. a goodbye lunch specifically for parents to give them the hint it was time to leave. This really was a stealth helicopter parent story grouping, wasn't it? I'm sure there'll be others, but for now let's just focus on this whole frickin' helicopter family, including cousins. What the heck? Also, love the passive-aggressiveness of that university. Oddest story I had was one room that had two completely different roommates. Not like goth and yacht club, odd couple sort of thing, but two different away-from-home experiences. One had been in a boarding school for years and was laid back. The second was a homeschooler with drill sergeant dad and doting mother. The laid-back resident's parents didn't even show up. I asked him if he came alone, and he said his parents were in town, but wanted to avoid the chaos and would say goodbye tomorrow. Second resident almost seemed dazed when his parents left. His dad told him to stay in college, like an order, while mum cried and took forever to leave. The next day I checked in on both. One was gone. The homeschooled one had moved out, drove a few hours and had arrived at his house 20 minutes after his parents did. A fellow student in the dorm was from the same town and even the same church, which is how we found out. The parent of the remaining resident had showed up the next day, asked where their son's room was at. I told them and they thanked me, then asked if the freshmen had events planned or if they were free for dinner because they wanted to take their son and his new roommate out for dinner. In short, one resident, sheltered his whole life, couldn't last 24 hours away from extreme parents. Ah, frickin' A. I had one of those living across from me, only it went on for an entire year. Excuse the wall of text. In New Zealand, practice is that you're only allowed in the dorms during your first year, or if you have a disability that living on campus will be helpful for. And we say halls of residence, or halls for short. Disabled students always get first dibs on the ground floor dorms. Internationals get self-catered kitchen dorms. Out-of-town New Zealanders get randomly given the leftovers. And lastly, the locals get what's left, if there's anything. And as my uni could only house slightly under 2,000 students but would get well over 4,000 applicants, very few locals ever got in. So the fact that my hallmate and neighbour managed to snag a room despite living a 30-minute drive away within the same city was surprising and impressive. Her national sports comps were probably what did it. Cut to night 1 in the halls. It's just after 4 a.m. I hear banging on my door. I unlock it, my hallmate sticks in her head, turns on my light. Tosses me her key, tells me to watch her room and leaves. I only met her like 2 p.m. the previous day, so I was thinking, what the frick has she trusted me for? And she didn't even lock her door when she left. It was wide open, with almost everything still in it. At 5 a.m. in a building with 30 other people, many hungover or still drunk, who became the infamous building for door handle theft. My anxiety was through the roof. She came back just before lunch, got her keys, ate a salad, explained nothing, acted like an otherwise normal sane human who missed her folks like everyone else. Dinner comes and afterwards she passes me her keys again and leaves. Leaves everything unlocked again, gives no explanation, even leaves her phone behind. And she did it again the next day, and the next day, and the next day. Right up until O Week ended, by which time the whole building knew she slept at her parents' every night. I feel like I'm keeping some kind of dangerous secret by having the keys, but what can you do? She was a really good friend when she was around. During the semester, she'd stay in her room between classes, she'd eat at the lunch bar, hang out in the study space, sometimes she'd eat breakfast with us after being dropped off, but come dinner's end, I got her keys. She only actually slept in her room 5 times? I counted. It was such a frickin' waste of money, time, and someone else's spot. I still talk and study with her 3 years on, and she's fully and finally moved out now. She'll still give me her keys if she leaves on the weekend, despite now having roommates, a boyfriend, and her cousins living a few doors down who'd all be better candidates. I've just resigned myself to it, though I still don't know why I'm the chosen one. I'm too scared to ask at this point. More funny than sad or bad, but this happened when I was moving into the dorms in my freshman year. I'm the second child in my family, so my parents had already gone through it once. My dad saw another father on move-in day who looked like he was on the verge of tears. My dad, trying to be friendly to the stranger, went up to talk to him. First kid going to college? No, it's just that I went to Michigan and my daughter's going to Michigan State. It's really hard for me. When I was an RA in 2014 through 15, one of my residents was 27 or 28 and was still having a hard time moving out of the house. But not because of her emotions. Her parents came over every night for dinner. They were over an hour away and they kept on trying to get her to drop out and move back home. It became really hard for her. It got to the point where she asked me and the other RAs to tell her parents that she was out when they came to see her. They got mad since the first time we had to tell them that. She didn't know what she was going to do after the school year ended, but that she didn't want to move back home. She just wanted to be free from them. My God, I mean, this sounds like a job for the witness protection program, or more realistically, an intervention by a therapist. Who am I kidding? If they've made it this far, it's going to take them a miracle to stop getting involved. A friend's dorm had the worst case of parent-student separation that I've ever seen. You see, there wasn't any separation. At least there wouldn't have been if the mother had had her way. The day after move-in, the girl's mother showed up in the middle of the day and asked for keys to the daughter's room. Yeah, no. Then she wanted someone to come with her upstairs and let her in. She was only there to get her daughter's dirty clothing. Why can't she do that? Still no. After 20 minutes of arguing, the woman left a note and told the poor guy at the front desk that it wasn't the last he'd heard from her, and insinuated that he was some kind of prevert or unspeakable act offender for covering the desk in a woman's dorm. She said he'd be lucky if firing and being kicked out of school was all that happened to him. When the student was informed, she seemed totally embarrassed, apologized for her mother, and said that it wouldn't happen again. 2 days later, the woman came back at 5:30 in the morning, shoulder-surfed the passcode to the building, and then, when her child wouldn't answer calls from the lobby phone, she snuck upstairs when one of the residents was leaving. She woke up the entire wrong floor of people by banging at the door to an empty room, and eventually got escorted out by my friend and public safety. But I just want to take my baby out for breakfast. How am I going to know she's eating right if I don't? I'm her mother and I pay for everything, so you can't make me leave. I'm going to sue you. You're trying to keep me from my baby. Public safety had to keep one of their staff in the lobby 24/7 for the next 3 weeks. It would have only been a few days, but scuttlebutt was that she tried twice more, including once in disguise. And by disguise, I mean sunglasses, a baseball hat, and a set of university sweats. Engineering school in the 1970s. A mum dropped her kid off at his dorm and drove away. Yep, pushed his suitcase and a few boxes out of the car, told Junior goodbye, study hard, and left. Junior was 15 frickin' years old, a super genius child prodigy with zero social skills. His roommates were horrified, but most of them had little brothers, so big brother parenting kicked right in. The kid was pretty well socialized by the end of the first semester and had a collection of de facto big brothers and big sisters helping him live his life. It was a relief because as a house counselor, I was really worried I was going to have a bad situation on my hands. I didn't need to do anything at all. I did buy the older guys beers a few times to thank them. I had to tell the parents of an 18-year-old freshman that I'm not allowed to key you into her room to set up a surprise party. Even if Mom is paying for the dorm, it's a legal thing. Mom was angry. She called her daughter, who then agreed we should have keyed them into her room because Mom is paying. Sorry, still not allowed. Their roommate talked to me privately. She's very pleased that we didn't let strangers in while she was doing the deed with her boyfriend, and that is why we have rules. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I worked in housing. I think the worst was the overprotective mother. She constantly called her son, who ended up not answering after the third call of the day. The mum would call his RA, who'd go into the student's room and tell him to call his mum. If he didn't do this, she called the RA again and had this on repeat. It hit its climax when the mother couldn't get her son or the RA on the line and called the office in a fit of panic that her son had done substances and died. Nope. He was just playing pool and ignoring his phone. I think the director of housing stepped in at that point and we didn't hear anything after that. This kid's mum left him a $100 Subway gift card for food. He sold it to another freshman for $20 to buy alcohol from an older student. He then proceeded to spend the next 2 weeks begging food and money from people. In addition, any legal issues or housing violations we had, this kid just happened to be around for them. Never really the perpetrator, but he always seemed to be there. Had a neighbor a couple of doors down in my freshman year that moved in and immediately started taking green herb in his room in the middle of the day with dozens of other freshmen and parents still milling around the floor moving stuff. My roommate and I walked by and tried to tell him to keep it on the down low, but someone had already called the cops. The guy got a possession and paraphernalia charge and had to go down to the station, then attend an academic council. He barely scraped by but was able to stay. Sounds like the guy could have benefited from a little more helicopter parenting, to be completely honest, if only to knock the damn thing out of his hands until things quietened down. My RA time was in the early 90s. The worst I saw was a guy who cried for 4 days after his mum dropped him off. It was the first time he had been away from home and had been extremely sheltered and couldn't handle being alone. It took a while, but his roommate was friendly and a genuinely nice guy, and he helped him acclimate. The second wasn't necessarily separation issues, but a fight between a father and the roommate. His son was hetero, and he and the dad were both strict Christian and macho stereotypical jock types. He saw the posters that his roommate had up, mostly muscly men in Speedos and musical posters. They both went ballistic and started attacking the poor kid. He stood up for himself and they jumped him. It took me, the other RA, and 3 other guys from the floor to pull them off. We ended up kicking him out of the dorm and he was reprimanded by the university. This was over a decade ago. Mum and Dad moved their daughter onto my floor. Most parents arrive and leave within 3 to 4 hours. This family were one of the first to arrive at 8:30 when the doors opened, and they spent the morning decorating. I was busy, so I said, "Hi," and kept on trucking. They took their daughter out for lunch and got back at like 2 p.m. It's a very nice send-off so far. At 4 p.m., they were still there. The room was decorated, the daughter and dad were just awkwardly sitting there, not sure of what to do, but the mum was fussing back and forth around the tiny dorm room. At 6 p.m., I was rounding up anyone who wasn't already down for dinner to make sure the introverts didn't just hide in their rooms on the first night. This family was still sitting in this room together. So I said, "Hey, we're all going down for dinner. Ashley, would you like to join us?" Her mum answered, "Well, we're sort of getting set up here, so..." And seeing what was happening, I said, "Well, move-in hours expired an hour ago and we're a little strict about visitors, as I'm sure you can understand. Why don't you guys say your goodbyes and Ashley can meet us downstairs?" The mum non-committally said, "Okay, we'll see." But I had like 10 other people with me, so I couldn't wait around. I got back to my floor at 8 p.m. and they were still there. Almost 12 hours now. I was trying to be polite and compassionate for the mum's sake, but I told them the parents would need a visitor's pass for staying the night if they wanted to stay longer. The mum didn't say anything to me but confirmed that she'd heard the message. About 20 minutes later, the parents left. I talked to Ashley and she said her mum was really overbearing. I introduced her to some of the other girls who might run in the same cliques, and she settled in really well after that. This mum ended up being my freaking nightmare for the first 2 months of that semester. Not an RA, but on the move-in day of my first year of uni, one of my 5 flatmates called us all into the kitchen to demand that we each let her 2 parents, 4 siblings, and 4 grandparents sleep in our rooms for the next week. The kicker? None of them would be staying in her room because she, quote, needed her space. Oh, and the other kicker, her family lives half an hour away from campus. They didn't want to be too far from her in case something happened. This was the first time I'd met her in person, and obviously we all said no to her demands. "How are you going to ensure that my daughter remains a virgin?" I can't do that, sir. That conversation will have to happen between you and her." Oh, I remember the nice dad who came to me asking if I'd seen the box of his daughter's handmade crafts and decorations. He was pretty sad. Someone must have picked it up accidentally, and I never saw it returned. This one is pretty wholesome, in the opposite direction of the worst. The mum was foreign, maybe Italian or Eastern European. She hugs her really tall son goodbye. You can tell it's a huge deal to her. She leaves, and I watch him walk towards his dorm with the biggest smile on his face. Favorite moment from move-in day. Not an RA, but I was involved in campus life and move-in. There's always several students who bring in all their stuff and bring it right back out 2 hours later because they aren't ready to leave. It honestly breaks my heart every time. I've seen one specific person do this 3 years in a row. I think she's living at home and taking community college classes now. We had one girl who lied to her family for months that she had a dorm room. She even showed up with her family and her things, and when we didn't have a room for her, she just broke down and sobbed. Like, holy heck, she had her family drive 8 hours north for this. I don't know how she endured that car ride. Oh hey, did you know my college roommate? It wasn't exactly the same circumstances, but one of my 2 roommates freshman year showed up on move-in day and set up her bed and desk and everything. She convinced her family she'd unpack the rest later, then she toured the campus with them and said goodbye. Then she grabbed the giant box of all the things she actually needed, clothes, toiletries, etc., and moved them to her boyfriend's house off campus where she stayed all year, while still paying for the dorm. It was absolutely bonkers to me that her family never apparently found out. Worked out for me though, I had the space of a triple while only having 1 roommate instead of 2. Haha, well that's one way to get your conservative family off your back, I guess. I think whether or not we think this girl is being a manipulative monster probably lies in whether her family or her were paying, and whether she was forced to take this measure by oppressively traditional parents or not. It sounds like the relationship worked out though, at least for that year. Just yesterday, I had some parents who wanted to set up a webcam in the hallway in front of their daughter's room so that they could see when she got back and who was entering her room. Not an RA, but helpful with moving in every year I was at college. Free food, yay! Every day there'd be at least one family who brought a U-Haul, not just the trailer but the full truck, full of stuff that they, quote, can't live without. It was usually someone who was planning on pledging to a sorority and had boxes upon boxes of costumes. More often than not, they were moving into rooms where, after splitting the space with a roommate, they had less space than was in that truck. There was also the people who expected us to do everything for them. No, I don't know what room you're in, and no, I'm not hauling that full-size fridge up there for you. I was an RA for 3 years, and while this wasn't move-in day, it's probably the worst parent interaction I've ever had, and I worked in the school's conduct office as a grad student where parents would call angry because their precious angel broke housing policy. This kid was a sophomore, roughly about 20, and his parents moved him in at the beginning of the spring semester. I went door to door, welcoming residents back and welcoming new residents to the floor, and then I got to this kid's room. The parents were setting up everything for him, and he's standing in the corner just watching with a blank expression. I introduce myself, ask his preferred name, nickname, etc., and ask if there's anything I can do to help. Total silence, and his parents look at me like I'm the scum of the earth for talking to them. Flash forward maybe a month. The kid is having roommate problems, and so after some mediation, they decide to go separate directions, with the roommate moving into a different room in the building. So now, this kid lives alone. I should say that they had a busy schedule and friends in other buildings, so they weren't around much, which is what made this next part of the story very difficult. It was a Saturday morning, in probably February, so we weren't even that far into the semester, and who shows up but this kid's parents? Okay, cool. Coming to visit your kid is nice, right? Wrong. Kid wasn't answering his door, so the parents came and knocked on my door at 7:30 on a Saturday morning, demanding to know where he was. Not being his babysitter, I didn't know, but his parents had stuff for him and asked if they could leave it with me because they didn't want someone to steal it. Being the nice person I am, I agree, thinking, oh, it'll probably be a box of stuff. Again, wrong. 5 boxes of food, clothing, video games, and books later, the parents have left and told me to tell their kid to call them. Now, I go and knock on this kid's door every hour because I have to leave that afternoon and I'm getting no response. I call my supervisor and explain the situation, and we end up calling the campus police to do a wellness check because no one has seemed to have seen this kid in the past 24 hours. The kid finally comes back from the library, he slept there, and he's annoyed that we entered his room, again, with the police present. Oh no, this isn't the last of it. Since I agreed to hold on to stuff for the parents that one time, every time they'd come to visit, every 2 weeks, and they lived 2 hours away, they'd bang on my door at an absurd hour to demand to know where their son was. At one point, one of my fellow RAs left the building to find the parents in the lobby, asking everyone who came by there where I was because I wasn't answering my door, and how would they know where their son was without me? Truly, the kids suffered from helicopter parents and just didn't like calling them. Go figure. This happened for the rest of the semester, and at move-out, they forgot and left their kid there until 10 p.m. when the dorms closed at 6, and the poor kid was just sitting on the sidewalk waiting for them. In short, I tried to be an accommodating RA, and parents mistook me as a babysitter for their 20-year-old son. When did you win by faking it until you made it? When I got my first construction job, I had to go buy a bunch of gear. Carhartts, which are heavy work pants, steel-toe boots, and a bunch of hand tools. The first thing I did when I got home was take the pants out to the garage and drag them through the dirt on the floor, stomp on them, rub some oil on them, and pull out a few threads. The steel toes got hit with a shovel and dirtied up, and the tools got their handles scraped and dirtied. I showed up on site with 2 other guys who looked like they were mannequins from the store. They got razzed for their shiny new gear, and they thought I knew what I was doing. Suckers. I went to Cheonan World Dance Festival in Korea, which includes a massive parade down the main street of the city. The best spot I could get where I could actually see was right at the end of the parade behind a fence. There was a grandstand there that was filled with VIPs, family of the mayors and officials of the sister cities. One of the guards came up to me and ushered me past the gate and brought me up into the grandstand and sat me right behind the mayor of Cheonan. Then they started passing around free samples of products made in or near Cheonan. Afterwards, they made everyone applaud the visitors and take pictures of us shaking hands with the mayor. I was so lost, but I just went with it because it was such a great time. My kids and I were in a touristy area of Mexico, and there was this fancy resort that had access to the beach. We weren't part of the resort, but they had really nice pools. We realized that the only things designating resort patrons were that they were all American and had specific towels. Well, we were already American, and then we got some discarded towels. We spent 2 full days hanging out at the resort. At one point, my daughter made friends with someone with a gold towel, so she got to use that. The gold towel got her all the free soda she could drink. Way back when I was 17, I was working at a conference at MIT, and I came across a packed lecture hall. They were showing the World Cup, and the hall was full of people rooting for Brazil. So I sat down and started cheering for Brazil, got instant acceptance. They started giving me beers, and I skipped work and got blasted, cheering for a team I had no connection to in a sport I didn't care about all day. It was so much fun. I like that a bunch of these stories are people getting into areas or situations to get ahead in life, but this guy just started cheering a sport he wasn't even interested in for free booze. I probably would have done it too in university, who am I kidding? While in high school, I went to Columbia University for some seminar on publishing. I was working on my school's art and literary magazine, and our supervisor thought that this would be a big help for us. After the seminar, I was wandering around, taking in the sights of this big, prestigious institution, when I came across a different seminar, this one for Columbia law students. I would have kept walking, except this seminar included a free lunch, pizza, and I was hungry. So I walked into the seminar, took a seat, and pretended to be a law student at Columbia University. I listened to the speakers for a bit, chatted very briefly with some of the other attendees, got my pizza, and got the heck out of Dodge. I managed to get some required immunizations after the health center closed by accident. I did the checkup thing, the doc told me I'd need to go downstairs and ask for vaccine 1 and vaccine 2, and that I'd be good to travel after that. I didn't know better, so I did exactly that. I walked down to the lobby, saw the sign for the lab I was directed to, and walked straight in to tell the tech back there exactly what I needed. The tech gave me the vaccines, and it wasn't until afterwards that I found out that A, they were closed, and B, you're supposed to make a separate appointment for that. The tech just assumed I was someone important because I didn't hesitate. Guy Gomer. This dude goes into BBC TV studios for a regular job interview. Gomer was waiting in the main reception area of the BBC television centre in West London to be interviewed for a job as a data support cleanser in the corporation's IT department. Unfortunately, he has the same first name as the guy being interviewed on the BBC News that day. Shenanigans ensue, he's interviewed for several minutes before the hosts realize he's not the right person, and he's gained a ton of pop culture notoriety and made a bunch of fun, paid television appearances since then. Years ago, I took a DSLR camera to a concert. When they told me I couldn't bring it in, I lied and said I was with the college newspaper and we were running a front-page story on the venue and I needed pictures. I talked to the event coordinator and she asked the band, and the next thing I knew, I had a press pass. That lie got me in the gap between the stage and security. I had no idea how to use that camera, but I faked it. Then I handed off the badge and the camera to my friends, and one by one, they faked it. That was a great time. For real? My job. On a rational level, I know that I'm good at it. I'm successful, popular with coworkers and my superiors, and people tell me they love my work on a regular basis. But I still have a serious case of imposter syndrome every other day. What am I doing here? I shouldn't be allowed to work here. I have no idea what I'm doing. Stop paying me for this and hire actual professionals. I went to a Flatbush Zombies concert and we got VIP passes, which effectively meant nothing. There was a second floor where the bands were hanging out and one lone security guard at the bottom of the stairs. We just briskly walked past him and held up our wristbands and he didn't say anything. We used the same method to get on stage with all the bands and to sneak out the back door and smoke with Meech. Walking to my bus on the way home from winter break, I realized I'd brought tickets for the wrong day, don't ask how, and after a brief call the company told me I couldn't do anything about it and it was the last day I was allowed to be on campus. Realizing I was stuck, I decided to just get on the bus anyway. The driver barely looked at my ticket before nodding me on, and I immediately got on and sat next to a friend and went to sleep to avoid suspicion. When I woke up, my friend told me that they'd overbooked and some people had to wait on a second bus. After I got home, I found out they'd left mine and a few other bags behind, so I had to call up again and negotiate having my bags sent for me and a few students who weren't fluent enough in English to negotiate for themselves. Luckily, after multiple speech checks and no one asking for my info, I made it home with all my stuff. And that's the story of how I stowed away on a bus. In short, no one ever questions a sleeping person on a bus. Being an artist manager, it felt like I had to act like I belonged every single day when I was just starting out. Meetings, phone calls, emails, everything. It felt like I needed some sort of confidence and D-bag attitude I didn't think I had. It felt weird trying to be someone else at work every day. When I was in Croatia, I walked into an aquarium where a German school group of about 16 to 18-year-olds were waiting for their teacher to pay them in. I was only 19 at the time, so I just stood amongst them like an inconspicuous penguin, and once we were shuttled in by our tour guide, I flaked off to look at some turtles. Despite being 6'2", I'm consistently good at blending into crowds to the point of being invisible pretty much without trying. I've accidentally walked into the wrong party before and stayed there for a few hours, when in reality I was invited to the one next door. Huh, real-life invisible man here. I wonder how you didn't realize that you didn't know anyone or that the person who invited you wasn't there either. Wild. When I was in college, parking was hell to find during football games, and often you had to park over a mile away. They also wouldn't let you near the stadium unless you were faculty or a cop. However, at the time we had construction going on, and lots of people were driving large white trucks just like the truck I had. Seeing this, I took it upon myself to try my limits and try to get on campus without being stopped. 9 times out of 10 it worked, and I could park right outside the stadium. You can go anywhere you want if you have a clipboard, safety vest, and hard hat. And if nothing else works, a ladder. I'm a massive, lifelong Star Wars fan, so when The Last Jedi premiered, I leapt at the chance to go. The problem was, it was on a weekday, and while I took a Ferris Bueller day, none of my friends did. Additionally, I had a migraine in the morning of, so I ended up arriving quite late at the venue at 10 a.m. I was still quite zonked out from the migraine and subsequent medication, and was hustling towards the queue, occasionally asking workers if I was going in the right direction. They all confirmed that I was, and it was just around the corner. Eventually, I arrived at what I thought was the end of the queue, as there were people waiting around in costume, and I settled in for the long wait. A few hours later, it was time to move into the venue, and I'm stoked. I get up and eagerly follow the people in front of me, who I now realize are in wheelchairs, and are wearing Star Wars wristbands, and are actually first in the queue. I'm not in a wheelchair, I do not have wristbands, but I am in front of the queue. Oh, crap. Thoughts of the IT crowd filled my head, and in an instant my anxiety kicked in. I could feel the panic attack rising in me as I trudged behind them, awaiting the order to go to the back of the queue, which at that point meant I probably wouldn't get in. I debated just booking it to the nearest alleyway to have my shame-induced panic attack in private, when I noticed I was part of the group instead of behind them. I started panicking even more and tried to move, but to no avail. We had just passed through the gates and I was officially in the premiere. I stood inside the gates for a moment, debating whether or not I should leave out of pure guilt, when the group I pretended to be part of sped past me cheering. No comments on how I was clearly not disabled, no one stopped me to check for a wristband. I don't know if that group hated me and was ignoring me, didn't care about one person cutting the queue, or if they were actually helping. All I know is that it was one of the greatest nights of my life, seeing some of my childhood heroes and experiencing the magic of Star Wars in a whole new way. All thanks to a group of disabled people that didn't rat me out. In short, real life, I'm disabled moment. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Back in 2006, I went to Lollapalooza and there was an after-party that my favorite band was playing at. My friend and I didn't have tickets, so we just went up to the back door of the venue. I whispered to my friend, act as if, like from the movie Boiler Room, and he says, okay, and just follows my lead. So we follow a band member in saying, "Hold the door please," and they did, thinking that we worked there and we're just out for a smoke. We ended up walking up the stairs and watching the band on stage. No idea how we didn't get caught and kicked out, but that might have been one of the coolest things, act as if, ever got someone. Ended up on the same flight home as the band after that too, coincidentally. I didn't really participate in any after-school clubs besides playing a sport. One day they were taking club pictures for the yearbook, so me and my buddy just decided to jump in every club pic that they were taking. Ended up being in choir, band, advanced French, ultimate frisbee, and future teachers of America, to name a few. Would have been in the robotics club, but we did get ratted out by that point. Princeton reunion. Lived in Princeton, New Jersey for a while. Everyone kept talking about the reunion. Apparently every year they throw a massive drinking party on campus. You need a wristband to get in, but there's plenty of old alums in the area that get them and don't want them. My brother's friend scored a couple, and with some careful passing back and forth, we all managed to get in. This party was wild. Like flash your wristband, here's a free beer. They were tossing empty kegs into a mountain-sized pile like you might do with a can in a backyard barbecue. People were drunk and very friendly, until you told them you were from Kansas and didn't go to Princeton. Then you were a pleb and very quickly dismissed. So screw it, we just started making stuff up. Yeah boy, what are you in? Me? Eastern linguistics. Astronomics. Oh, okay, let's get another beer. I had so many made-up degrees that by the end of the night I was having trouble keeping them straight because I'd keep rerunning into people from before. I also peed in a lot of weird, shady corners all over campus that night. Turns out people at Princeton aren't necessarily the smartest people in the world, but they sure are nice if they think you're part of their fancy club. They throw one hell of a party though. Last weekend we got the train to London and jumped in the first open table in first class and enjoyed the free tea and Wi-Fi. It helps that the ticket guy didn't come around, but none of the staff cared enough to say anything. I landed a cushy GS11 position, and I still don't feel like I really know all of this stuff well enough to be here. I just act confident and pretend to know what's going on. I suspect everyone else is doing the same thing. This is government work after all. I was at the South by Southwest Gaming Expo in Austin, Texas. There was an area full of really high-tech gaming computers, and I saw other people casually playing. When a computer finally opened up, I sat down and soon a game of PUBG begins. It turns out it was a tournament and I'd taken someone else's seat. There were people crowding around to watch over our shoulders, and an announcer started talking. I'd never even played the game before, and I didn't do very well. These guys trained all the time, and I'd never even so much as launched the game. This is the natural result, but the narrator does know of a similar but different story of another spontaneous tournament gamer. I think he was an Aussie guy who ended up winning in a low-level Command & Conquer 3 tournament, and ended up going to a higher level for a while. But that individual actually was a strategy pro gamer, just one who'd never played that particular game. A friend got me a job when I was 17 doing graphic design. This particular position required more than 3 years of experience and an understanding of pretty much every Adobe program. He lied when vouching for me and basically said, if anyone asks, you're 20 and you know exactly what you're doing. If you have any questions about what to do, ask me. Prior to that, I'd done maybe 3 or 4 graphic design projects as freelance gigs, but I was still very new to it. That job worked out a lot better than it should have, no one asked too many questions, and it helped me realize that even though I was doing graphic design as a hobby, doing it for work hurts my soul. When I was studying abroad in Costa Rica, my friend who was a rugby player back in the States wanted to go to this rugby practice he randomly found out about while talking to a guy who was on this team. Next thing I know, my skinny white butt was being hauled along so he didn't have to go alone. I was in a legit club rugby practice that's all in Spanish, and I barely spoke any at this point, trying to do my best to fit in with all of these hulking, terrifying-looking rugby players. Luckily, I've participated in my fair share of sports practices growing up, so I was able to figure out what the drills were just by watching them, and was able to run through practice kinda like I knew what I was doing. Eventually, I was paired up with this one huge beast to do tackling drills. I think he might have figured out my ruse, so he took it easy on me and taught me some basics. He was really cool. Went on to find out afterwards that this team was playing in something like the Latin American Club Rugby Championships, and that player was the best rugby player in Latin America. Go figure! I started at my current employer about 15 years ago. The manager of my department was this awful guy with no management experience. I filled the gaps to make do. One day he just announced he was going to focus on other tasks. Nobody thought to actually designate a new manager, so one day I just started doing all management's tasks. Another day, sometime later, I just started putting manager on my business cards and email tags. Nobody questioned it. A couple of years later, after I'd started seeing the need for better global coordination, I just started using global manager as my title. Again, no one asked anything. A couple of years ago, I upgraded to global directory of, and I was given several raises and nobody ever said, no you're not. And that's how I became a director in a global enterprise software company. Was taking some pictures in a city when I stumbled upon an outdoor fashion show which was free to visit, but had an area in front of the runway for photographers. So with my not-so-professional-looking gear, I went into that area, not knowing it was meant for real professionals who had signed up for it beforehand. I still don't know how I got in there without anyone noticing. Maybe it's because I was there very early and the organization wasn't up to speed yet. Other amateur photographers that tried to get in were turned away. I had crap gear, the wrong lens and everything, but no one questioned my presence. I had a blast trying out runway photography in that pretty crowded area. It must have looked like I belonged there because I wasn't kicked out. I moved to Columbus, Ohio in 2006 to start a new IT contract job for a fairly large company. I'd been there exactly 2 weeks when a woman walked up to my cubicle and popped her head in. "Hey, the lunch is starting, we should head in," she said, giving me the thumbs up and obviously expecting me to follow her. I had no clue who this woman was, what this lunch was, but I was new in town and I knew nobody. I was happy to head to a lunch with other people. We walked to a large conference room that was filled with chairs facing a podium, tables full of yummies and a ton of people, so I just got in line and grabbed some food. I knew nobody in there, but it quickly became clear that a lot of people there were strangers to each other and were from different departments. Handshakes and introductions were going around, and I just went with the flow. I introduced myself, said I was a contractor. I learned this was a good catch-all for not specifying what department you worked in, and I filled my plate with some great food. I sat down in one of the chairs, and for the next hour I listened to people talk about the new product and how it all worked so hard to implement it. How we all did such a great job and how the upper management was extremely proud of us. In the end, they had us get together for a large group photograph. I was right in front, dead center. Afterwards, there was a sign-in sheet that asked for our name and our supervisor. I filled it out, grabbed some food to go, and headed out. Over the next few months, I received updates in my email about the project, received an award that was delivered to my cube, received a couple of certificates for my accomplishments that I'd never accomplished, and was invited to a dinner a year later for the anniversary of the launch. I didn't want to push my luck on that one. It turns out that when I was brought on board to do my job, the department I was connected to didn't have any room, and I had to sit in a cube belonging to another department. It was assumed that I belonged to that department by others, and nobody really questioned it. My favorite thing about the whole group photo was that it was blown up and hung in the main lobby with other group photos, so I'll forever be a part of the group that I was never part of, and damned proud of it. When I visited India in 2013, we went to the Taj Mahal. Now, at the time, they had 2 rates to get in, a cheap rate for Indians and a pricier rate for foreigners. I think it equated to something like 20 pence for Indians and £7 for foreigners. They could normally spot who was a foreigner by clothing, way of speaking, and they also had checks to make them pay for the higher rate. I was with my mum, dad, and brother. They had lines separated by gender, so I went with my mum, and dad and brother went together. My dad wanted us to get in at the lower rate if we could because he wanted to save some money or something. Now, my mum is originally from India herself, so she knows how to fit in, and she got me and herself to pay the lower rate. My dad wasn't so successful. Him and my bro aren't originally from the country, even though his parents are. So he and my bro paid the higher rate. We got to the front of the Taj Mahal and I realized there were 2 queues to get in. The one for those who'd paid the lower rate was maybe 3 hours long, and it was 4 p.m. or so at this point. Then there was the shorter queue for those who'd paid the higher rate, which was maybe about 15 minutes wait, tops. We had 2 lower rate tickets and 2 higher rate tickets between the 4 of us, and they were quite distinctive in color. My dad decided he wanted us to all try to get in together on his and my brother's tickets. There was a security guy yelling at a guy in front of us who was trying to jump into the shorter queue on lower rate tickets, so my dad waved the 2 higher rate tickets he had in front of the security guy, who at that point said something along the lines of, "Look at these high rate tickets, this is what you need to get in the shorter queue." And he started waving us through, so we took that as a cue to get into the shorter queue. Had a blast of a time. When did a mansplainer get shut down? About a year into our marriage, we bought a dining table and chairs, our first real furniture. My wife was so happy that she posted the pictures on Facebook and wanted her mum to look. Her mum commented on the phone that it was a nice oval table. My wife is upset. "You didn't look." "Yes, I did. It's not oval, it's rectangular." "No, it's an oval. I looked." My wife finally gets her mum to go look. Her mum sees that she's incorrect and creates this gem. "Well, that's what I call an oval." "You mean you call rectangles ovals?" This has become a running gag to us. Whenever we lose an argument, we always end it with, "Well, that's what I call it." Was at the zoo. I said it was crazy that there are penguins in South Africa. My friend says I'm wrong and that there aren't any in Africa because it's way too hot for them there. I told him the only reason I brought it up is because we were literally at the African penguin exhibit. And the guy who insisted I was pronouncing my own name wrong. I was in class once where my classmate said his last name was Osborne, and some guy kept arguing, "I'm pretty sure it's Osborne." He got angry and yelled out, "I'm pretty sure I know how to say my last fricking name." Funny stuff. I was a stay-at-home dad for my 2 daughters. My youngest was a toddler at the time. Had a lady tell me that I had no business bathing my children because I was male and my kids were female. I welcomed her to the 21st century and told her to mind her own frickin' business. I was the person who needed correcting, actually. In grade 2, I explained to my entire class, as pretentiously as a 7-year-old could, that the singular of sheep is shoop. My logic was the singular of geese is goose, and that rule must apply to sheep as well. I still remember the other kids looking at me like I was dropped on my head as a baby. Yeah, the English language is inconsistent as all heck. That's what you get when you jam a whole bunch of other, also inconsistent languages together over the course of a millennium and then let it develop by itself. Senior kindergarten, I had an activity for Mother's Day to colour some pre-printed cards with 3 tulips. The teacher told us to colour them red, yellow, and orange. 6-year-old me coloured one purple because I didn't like orange. My teacher told me I was wrong and to redo it because purple tulips don't exist. I told my mum when I got home. She cut the purple tulip out of our garden, and I took it into class the next day to prove my teacher wrong. Someone corrected me on my gender once during a phone call. I have a gender-neutral name, and people screw it up online all the time. "Hello, could I speak to the name, please?" "Yep, this is she." "No, they're a man." I gave him a moment of silence to sort himself out, while I wheezed with trying to hold back my laughter. "What language is the most spoken in the world?" I said, "Chinese, probably, I think." "Well, no, it's Portuguese. Everyone knows that, idiot." "Vietnam is a war, not a country. A war that the US won." A guy told me he went to Nice for holiday. I said the south of France is a beautiful place. The guy laughs and tells me Nice is in Italy, but it's an easy mistake to make. I'm too shocked to respond. How the frick do you go on holiday and not know what country you're in? I was playing a pickup soccer match and I said something about scoring a goal directly from a corner kick. This guy immediately corrects me and says that goals directly from a corner don't count. He was absolutely adamant and talked about how he's played the sport his whole life and that it doesn't count at any level of the game. He's completely wrong. My mother-in-law is convinced that The Hobbit is a 2-book series. I've tried to disabuse her of this notion, including by showing her Wikipedia and copies of the book available on Amazon. She wouldn't have it. Eventually, the argument became heated and we had to agree to disagree. I still bring it up to my wife because it bugs her. I was arguing with my ex and I told her that I'm allowed to converse with anyone I'd like. She stopped the argument to tell me that the word is conversate and not converse. My mum. She had mental health problems and would express and insist on bizarre truths when she was ill. My boyfriend at the time came over. He said his parents were going to Hawaii. I said that I always wanted to visit an island in the Pacific. My mum asked if I was stupid. Hawaii is in Africa. She sounded the letters out extra long for emphasis. I just said I must have forgotten that and did my best not to laugh. My boyfriend became indignant and despite my frantically waving "no," proceeded to try and correct her and say that I was right. That didn't go over very well. I spent the next half hour in private trying to explain to him what delusions are. It was extra tricky because she was very intelligent. People just didn't expect the crazy. But when she cycled, oh boy could she come up with some humdingers. It was actually easier as she aged and her hair went grey. People understand dementia, so they weren't caught so flat-footed, and they'd respond to her with less indignation and more understanding. It made it easier for me to look after her as she aged. I never took offense to the stuff she said, because I knew her control over these things ebbed and flowed. When I was in kindergarten, I told all of the other kids that the word dumb was spelt D-U-M, without the B at the end, because in one of the Bugs Bunny and Wile E. Coyote cartoons, Bugs said, "And mud spelled backwards is dumb." The teacher tried to correct me, but I was insistent and eventually burst into tears because I'd just seen the cartoon that weekend, damn it, Miss Howley. We were at the beach and my wife was putting sunscreen on our toddler. A woman sitting close to us rolled her eyes and said to my wife, "That boy doesn't need sunscreen. Helicopter parents raise soft children. Ridiculous." We're pretty far from overprotective parents, so it caught us off guard for sure. Apparently, you can't raise a tough kid unless you give them the chance to develop skin cancer. Wow, gotta say that one has never come up in our Helicopter Parents series. Maybe if the narrator searched the submitted stories far enough, he'd find this lady complaining about the ridiculous fools pampering their children by protecting them from the sun. I was working as a receptionist on summer break from college. One day, a woman with a tired, Midwestern, middle-aged voice called from a potential vendor's office to ask for our mailing address. So I rattled off, 60 West 26th Street, Suite 400. She stops and asks me to repeat, so I do. She stops me again and asks in this faux puzzled way, "So that's SWEET 400. I reply with innocent earnestness because I think somehow I haven't been clear that it's sweet SUITE. She responds with this incredulous yet delighted laugh that goes on for what seemed like 5 minutes. "Dear, that word you just spelled isn't pronounced sweet," she said like she was talking to a 5-year-old that had just failed kindergarten. "It's pronounced suit." I thought she had to be joking, or I still haven't made myself clear, so I actually say, "No, sorry, I wasn't clear. It's sweet, you know, like a suite of officers." She then sighs wearily like she just can't believe what she has to deal with and levels with me. "Look, I feel bad for telling you this, but you're making a complete fool out of yourself every time you say your office address. I know you're going to be embarrassed, but when you get off the phone with me, go find a dictionary and have someone else explain to you how to pronounce the word. It's probably not your fault, it's your parents probably, giving you no schooling, and you were badly educated so you don't know any better, but if you don't want to be fired, you'll do as I say for your own good." She then proceeds to make me say the address again, insisting I pronounce sweet as suit, and not allowing me to continue if I say it correctly. So I mutter my way through it, and she finally gets off the phone after telling me that I'd thank her one day. I just kept wishing she'd inadvertently put the phone down wrong so it didn't disconnect, because I was pretty sure the next sentence out of her mouth to anyone within ears in her office would have been, "My God, you wouldn't believe that idiot I just spoke to. She kept telling me her office suite number. I didn't know what she was talking about, so I made her spell it out for me because I wasn't previously aware a human being could be so stupid as to pronounce SUITE as sweet when anyone with half a brain knows it's pronounced suit. Why oh why do they give morons jobs? Only to have everyone around her go, wondering if they should be the one to break the news and weather the storm. My first week as a freshman in college literature class, I referred to the peonies mentioned in a story, and my classmate said, "It's pronounced ponies." I looked doubtful and said, "Really? I'm pretty sure it's just peonies." She went on a bit of a rant about how her grandmother grew them and she knew all about them. Not everyone at a good university is necessarily all that bright. My little brother, then aged 8, read a neighborhood flyer about a pool party and pronounced hors d'oeuvre as horse duver. My friend, who was a know-it-all at 16, laughed in a really exaggerated way and said, "I can't believe you just pronounced horse duvor as horse duver." I hope that makes sense. I still make fun of her for that. A few weeks ago, I was stung by a bee in a theme park and the stinger wouldn't come out. I started getting a really bad rash from the venom, and the first aid lady laughed at me and said it wasn't coming from the bee sting because venom? Bees don't have venom. and she refused to give me any tweezers to help get the stinger out because I was acting like a baby. Probably when I was 5 years old and just starting school. My first name used to be one commonly spelt with a Y at the end, however mine was actually spelt with an I at the end instead. I wrote my name down, and my teacher kept telling me that I'd spelt it wrong, and we both argued and got very frustrated with each other. She was very embarrassed when another teacher put her in her place for shouting at me to the verge of tears when I'd actually spelt my name correctly. My girlfriend tried to convince me it was spelt phalanges with an F and not phalanges with a PH. She's really nice though. I had a teacher once correct my spelling of wolves, plural, to wolfs. This was an English teacher, and the editor of the school newspaper for which I was writing. She was the regular English teacher while I was in AP, so I wasn't familiar enough with her to realize that she was a blithering idiot. She also preferred to spell the plural of elf as elfs rather than elves. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My dad adamantly refused to believe that narwhals are real. I had to show him not just photos but videos of narwhals before he finally believed me. In all fairness, they're maybe the fakest animal that exists. They look like they're drawn by a 5-year-old. Also, did you know that the horn is just one tooth that's really long and comes through their lip? So it's not even in the center. It's enough to drive a person crazy. In 5th grade health class, I said that it wasn't true that gum takes 7 years to pass through your digestive system. My teacher then said that it's very dangerous to swallow gum because in your stomach you have an organ that, quote, mashes up your food, and when you swallow gum it gets stuck to that organ. She then said that eventually if you swallow too much gum you'll no longer be able to digest food. Is it that hard to tell kids about stomach acid? Okay, the narrator didn't know that stomach acid can actually break down chewing gum until this story made him go on a Google trip. So, folks, you heard it here first. Don't go swallowing that stuff because it's still not exactly easy on your tummy, and apparently it can stick together and snowball if you do it all the time, but it's not the end of the world if you accidentally gulp it in shock once in a while. I had a really self-assured science teacher. Here are some highlights. They told us that Harambe was shot for trying to eat a child, told us that gorillas were carnivores. When asked why, she said that no animal that big can survive off plants. Lady, you talked about dinosaurs. One of our subs had nicknames that she liked being called. One of them was Wicked Witch of the West, because she was very nice and not witch-like at all. Our science teacher told us which sub we'd have before she arrived, and one of our students said, "Oh, the Wicked Witch!" And that student got detention. When the sub arrived, we all made a point to greet her as the Wicked Witch. If that didn't shock the teacher, then the sub's delight at us remembering her nickname from 3 years ago was show-stopping. She told us that people in Florida didn't have basements, my aunt lived in Florida and had a basement, and told us that the school handbook prevented us from having our phones not shut all the way down. It said no such thing. And finally, a student asked how fast the Earth revolved. The teacher said flatly, 1 year. The student rephrased the question, realizing what he was asking and what the teacher thought he'd asked were different. He asked at how many miles per hour the Earth spun on its axis. 1 year, barked the teacher. 3 or 4 different people tried to explain the question, and one got sent to the hall. This lady was mid-40s and adamant that we weren't allowed to fact-check her. A student got detention from Googling the Harambe incident because she was supposedly out of area on her laptop. An adult woman, somewhere between 18 to 21, tried to fiercely argue with me, a 17-year-old boy, that women didn't have urethras and that they went #1 from their fun bean. I ran into our local vet and her very religious younger sister. As the vet and I talked, her sister looked out into the store parking lot and saw an old man staggering to his truck. The little sister said very primly, "There, but for the grace of God go I." I said, "Actually, he's a very well-respected man." She replied, "He's obviously drunk before noon." "No," I said, "he has MS. He's my father and your sister's pastor." The big sister had the grace to look embarrassed. My dad when he corrected me about how sugar causes health problems. My explanation is the whole fat storage, insulin resistance, diabetes thing, and his? His is that when you eat sugar, its rough edges nick the insides of your veins and arteries, roughing them up and making things catch on all of the nicks, leading to blood clots, strokes, and myriad other problems. He still also believes that blood is red, blue, and black, He's got a whole host of weird health facts. He's like the walking, talking version of those old medical catalogs that sell bizarre and outlandish products that don't work for serious ailments. I love him to death. I adore him enough to have him come live with us, but we do just shake our heads sometimes. I said to my mum in a conversation about World War II that the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, but she said, "That's wrong, North Korea did that." At my little sister's confirmation, I was her sponsor. I was 18, she was 14. The woman next to me got all nasty because I was nodding off, and she said I should be ashamed and I was being disrespectful. What she didn't know was that I had end-stage liver failure and had hepatic encephalopathy. Plus, I was on a lot of pain medication. Afterwards, I told my mum about it. Sponsors were seated separately from parents, and she was angry. She cornered this witch in the bathroom and just reamed her. Witch lady skulked out very quickly after that. Glad to say a year later I got my transplant and I'm now healthy and doing great, turning 27 in 10 days. Warning, cringy and also infuriating. My grandmother has Alzheimer's. I was explaining it to a few people when this girl in my class butts in and states that 1. Alzheimer's doesn't exist, only dementia exists, and 2. Alzheimer's is like crippling autism. It took all of my strength not to punch her into the next universe. I felt incredibly insulted and was understandably furious. Everyone was shocked at how rude and misinformed she was. It should be obvious by this point that the narrator is using mansplain to mean patronizingly explain a concept, and I think it works. This girl is just as annoying as any other proponent of, well, actually. I'm planning a game night between friends. One friend is not part of my usual circle and questioned why I needed a vegetarian pizza. Another friend is a vegetarian. I don't know the small differences between vegan or veggie, and I explained that it was for her. Also, the veggie pizza is amazing. The out-of-circle friend, being a smug F-word, pointed out that pizza has cheese. Well, yeah, but the veggie friend is okay with milk and eggs as it doesn't kill the animal. And new guy is off. Eating eggs is murder. I say, what? It doesn't kill chickens to lay eggs. It kills the baby chicken. Oh God, man. Oh, goodness gracious me. I did correct him, and he did accept the correction, but he was so excited to poke holes in my friend's diets just because of the vegetarian thing. Alaska isn't a state, it's a continent. Well, actually, the slaves didn't have it all that bad. The plantation owners took pretty good care of them because they paid good money for them, said my father-in-law. Both my husband and myself were speechless. I kind of still am. I said, I prefer vacations in some more mountainous areas than tropical, since I'm pretty scared of the ocean, sharks especially. My sister? Just go somewhere where sharks don't go, like Hawaii. Duh. My husband and I were having a party at our house. I'm a historian and have tons of old and unique things from around the world. A woman was looking at my collection of maps from around the place. I have a copy of the first map of the world, and she asked why the edge was wavy. I told her the map maker knew the Earth was round and decided to make the edge wavy for accuracy. But the Earth is flat, says the lady. We're not friends anymore. First class in school, so I was around 7 or 8, and I remember we were doing fruit and I said tomato. My teacher ridiculed me, saying it was a vegetable, and everyone laughed at me. I knew I was right but said nothing. Screw that saggy old bag. Reading all of these makes me irrationally angry. I have to go. When I was in first grade, they taught us to read Goofy Goes to Cuba, and it talked about how he saw a bunch of alligators. I raised my hand. There's no such thing as a Cuban alligator. The teacher said, obviously there are. That's not true. Are you calling me a liar? No, just uneducated. I got kicked out of the classroom. I was so mad. That weekend, I got my mum to take me to the Louisville Zoo, where I spoke to the reptile zookeeper and got him to write a letter and sign it for me. I brought it back to class the next Monday, and the teacher still said that the reptile keeper, the specialist on the subject, might be mistaken. Why? Because Goofy Goes to Cuba said so. Frick. I was at a hair salon with my mother years ago. We started to talk about the movie Django because we'd both recently watched it. Then this random girl next to us says, it's pronounced Django. We both just looked at her first off for being rude and interrupting our conversation, but also for saying Django wrong and trying to correct us. I looked at her and said, the D is silent. Peer reviewing in high school, which is fine until you take a non-honors English course and other kids can't spell. I'm an English major, and in high school I knew I wanted to be an English major in the future, so you'd better believe I had a solid frickin' grasp on spelling and grammar. I can understand minor, uninformed corrections, but this one made me angry. I believe the sentence I wrote was something along the lines of, "He was definitely lying." Definitely was spelt correctly with 2 I's. My sentence was corrected to, "He is lying," with lying spelt wrong, with a question mark by my spelling of definitely that pointed to a note on the side that said, "That's not a word. Did you mean defiantly?" I swear I've never been angrier in my life. A foreign student at my crappy community college randomly started lecturing me on the differences between where and were after I asked where I should go to make up a test. Unfortunately, he didn't really understand English as well as he thought, and he had mixed them up. He thought I should have asked, "Where do I go to make up the test?" There were a few other students around and none of them had the heart to stop him, so he went on condescendingly for a while about grammar while I just stood there confused and kind of annoyed at his audacity. He finally ended it by saying, "It's okay, you'll get it eventually," as if he'd just explained some super complicated crap. I never bothered correcting him on it, but I wonder if he looks back and cringes about how hard he failed to correct someone on their own native language. My friend asked, "Are your niece and nephew identical or fraternal twins?" I said, "Well, they're a boy and a girl, so obviously they're not identical." "That's not true. Boy and girl twins can be identical." Another friend chimed in, "I know it sounds weird, but it's true. If the zygote splits, they're identical. If there are 2 zygotes, they're fraternal." And I said, "Yes, but the zygote has 13 chromosomes from the father and 13 from the mother. You're telling me all the chromosomes are the same except one has an I and one has an X. That makes no sense." Friend number 2 corrected and said, I didn't think of that." The first one kept Googling but realized she was wrong. I mean, I know I didn't do too well in high school biology, but come on. When did a goofy army recruit nearly break their drill sergeant? I had one recruit paying attention to a bunch of geese rather than us. I made him get up and chase them all away. As they flew in the air, we made him follow them for several hundred feet to make sure they wouldn't come back. I was dying of laughter on the inside. I can pass along a classic boot camp story. I was in the Navy, and in the Navy, your final inspection as a division is before the division officer, or DO, which is usually some junior officer nobody that got assigned that job, but we didn't know that at the time. Anyway, before the inspection, one of our RDCs, or the recruit division commanders, that's what we call the division officer in the Navy, found a locker out of sorts and decided to beat us in our dress blues. That was not fun, let me tell you. Wool uniforms? If we lost our cover, we'd get beat more. It was bad. Anyway, the DO rolls in for inspection, walks up to the first guy in formation, and the guy chucks up. However, this guy is a frickin' genius. He chucked up down the t-shirt in his dress blues, saving the DO from the chunks and us from getting beat even more. The division officer was so impressed at this guy's military bearing that he called the inspection right then and there. A grade of 5-star sailors all round. We still got beat that night, but that one dude was our chucking hero. Standing in formation at Fort Knox, about to head to the range, and everyone needed their gloves. One private comes out without them and the drill sergeant screams, "Private, where the frick are your gloves?" In this thick Tennessee accent he goes, "Well, damn, drill sergeant, I must have done left them son witches up in the stairs." The drill sergeant then just collapsed in tears of laughter. At boot camp, it was time to bunk down, and one of the division commanders showed up and was doing a walkthrough. It was just before lights out. He was going through the head, and then there was a loud scream of, "Oh my god, he's just cranking it over here! Get your frickin' Johnson out of your hands and out of my sight! Why the frick is your Frankfurter staring at me, recruit?" Lights out did not happen as scheduled, and I still talk to the guy who got caught many years later. He was also my bunkmate. A division commander in another division asked a guy if he'd shaved that morning, and the guy claimed he had. The division commander said, "Recruit, you are either a werewolf or you're lying, so which is it?" And the guy responded with, "I must be a werewolf, petty officer." Most of these are even funnier when you remember that the encounters are shortly followed by the poor recruit in question being screamed at and forced to run for a very long time afterwards. I was going through Air Force basic training, and when on guard duty, if an unauthorized person wanted to be let into the bunks, you had to report it to your drill sergeant. Our sister flight's drill sergeant came up while I was on guard and requested entry, so I reported to my sergeant and he had me ask the other a series of questions. This particular sergeant had a bushy mustache, so one question I had to ask was, in what year was Magnum PI cancelled? He dropped out of view from the window laughing, came back up and yelled, "It was never cancelled because I'm still here!" It took everything I had not to crack up. So when you start basic, your body doesn't know how to handle no sugar, caffeine, rigorous exercise, and sleeping schedules, so it's in shock. With this shock, crapping becomes a problem for a few people. Well, every DI after the first week is required to ask around if everyone has gone number 2, and from there he assigns one recruit to track who's gone number 2 and who hasn't. I crap you not, pun intended, we had one guy who'd stand in the barracks at the end of the night rolling off names of people who hadn't gone number 2 yet. Finally, we had another guy who's still on there after 2 weeks, and the drill instructor tells him to go to the doctor. The doctor gives him a get-out-of-jail-free card, essentially saying that at any point, if he says the magical words, "I've gotta go," he can escape any situation. Well, recruit No Twosies, we'll call him, gets the smart idea that he's going to play his new trump card as long as possible. Every time we're getting grilled, it's, "I gotta go," ringing in from the back of the formation. This probably happened 6 times until our drill instructor caught on. Finally, the DI devises a plan that when recruit No Twosies goes to the bathroom, he's going to have a couple of us hold onto his legs and slide him into the stall, exorcist style. The time comes and recruit No Twosies excuses himself, we all follow our DI into the bathroom, and slide him under there like he's the spawn of Satan. This catches recruit No Twosies by surprise. He doesn't know what the frick is going on as the DI is utterly berating him about lying and using this as an excuse to sit on the loo. Then we hear a very audible, "Oh, crap," from the stall. The DI scared the recruit so much he actually went twosies right then and there. The DI then made every recruit look at it and we played taps for it as we flushed it down the toilet. While in basic, we had a female that loved to smile. She was just a happy person in general. Well, my TI, or training instructor, came in and she caught the female trainee smiling. TI didn't like smiling. She walked up to the female trainee and yelled, "Wipe that smile off your face." The female trainee stopped smiling. The TI continued to yell, "No, literally wipe the smile off your face with your hand." The trainee does so. "Now throw it on the ground." Trainee follows orders. "Now stomp on it and scream, 'Die, smile, die' as loud as you can." The female trainee stood there for a few seconds before following through. Her tiny little voice cracks as she yelled, "Die, smile, die!" And I'll say it took everything I had not to burst out laughing. I had a guy in my Navy division, not really a big deal smiler, just his facial physiognomy. He looked like he was grinning. About the second phase of training, he made an effort to frown to stop the attention. At some point, the division commander asked him what he was smiling about. He responded with something like, "Not smiling, petty officer, I'm just ugly." I had a great team sergeant who had a floater, which is a wonky eye, that he was blind in from an injury in Iraq. So one eye was dead on and worked fine, but he had this one Uncle Ruckus eye that just did its own thing. He was a very physically imposing man with that classic drill sergeant bass-filled voice, and his crazy eye just added to it, and he knew. He told a story about his time as a drill sergeant when 2 privates had sat down on fire watch and were just kind of being real lackadaisical about their duties when he found them. So he started giving them the business, classic Full Metal Jacket style, and finally he just ended his rant right before he was about to smoke them for who knows how long, when one of the offending privates just says, "Drill Sergeant, are you yelling at us or the water fountain?" It stopped him dead in his rage and he just walked away mid-knife hand. We weren't allowed to talk during chow at the galley. You had to point at what you wanted, another recruit to pass you, and they had to silently pass it over. One recruit wanted a napkin and pointed. The other recruit asked, "This?" The Coast Guard drill sergeant immediately came over, circling him like a shark, screaming at him. They made him put like 10 saltines in his mouth and chew until his mouth was full, and then asked the first recruit if he wanted a napkin again. He could barely get it out, spitting pieces of cracker everywhere. Then they screamed at the first recruit to answer him, but we were all silently cracking up. It sounded like this. "Sir, want a napkin?" with pieces of saltine flying out. "Answer him!" My friend cracking up, almost crying, "No, thank you." It was the best. We had 2 5'1" stocky blonde guys named Johnson in our company one cycle. Different platoons, no relation at all, but they looked really similar. One day during grass week, a couple of J-hats made them face each other and go back and forth screaming, "You're not Johnson, I'm Johnson. No, frick you, you're not Johnson, I'm Johnson." You have no clue how hard it was not to break into a million pieces after about 5 minutes of that. Oh boy, it's nice when theatre and military matters can come together. Also, in case you haven't noticed, the narrator has had to take the original language down about 60 notches for this video. I was a super light sleeper during basic training. One night I woke up for no reason. The sleeping bay was dark except for the light by the desk where the 2 soldiers on fire guard were supposed to be awake and alert. Both of them were leaning back in their chairs, dead asleep. I started to throw my covers off and go wake them up. If a drill sergeant came through and caught the fire guards sleeping, we'd all pay. But then I heard a slow scraping sound to my right, off in the darkness. I froze, heard it again, closer, and a few heartbeats later, I almost screamed out loud as I saw the sharp, intense face of our Samoan drill sergeant in the darkness. His face was covered in full camo. He was low-crawling underneath the line of bunk beds towards the fire guards. He had a bayonet in his teeth. We locked eyes and he silently raised a finger to his mouth, signaling for silence. I nodded and sat back to watch the show as the drill sergeant resumed his low crawl under and past my bunk in the direction of the sleeping guards. I have a bunch of stories of funny crap I did to correct soldiers when I later became an NCO myself, but that image, like something straight out of an 80s war movie, will always stick with me. In Navy boot camp, they called forced PT beatings. Everyone knows what a beating is. The Navy doesn't have drill instructors. They call them recruit division commanders, or DCs. One day, standing in ranks, the DC is going around asking random trivia questions about a test we had to take to make sure we had been studying. He gets to a guy who was eccentric, to say the least. This is about a month and a half into boot camp. DC asks the question, the guy gets it wrong, so DC yells, "No, wrong, beat yourself." Literally everyone knew this meant start doing push-ups, so the expectation is that he'll start doing push-ups, as the DC moves to the next guy in question. I was standing across from the guy and he had a confused look on his face. He looked at his own hand for 5 seconds, then hauled off and slapped himself in the face. It made a loud crack sound. He got himself good. I cracked and chuckled, trying to keep my composure at attention. The DC looked at me, then realized why I had laughed had to do with the slapping sound. He turned back to self-slapping guy and asked him if he slapped himself. The guy says, "You told me to beat myself." Cue the entire barracks cracking up. It was a single moment during boot camp where the curtain was raised and a moment of unadulterated levity came over everyone. The DC couldn't even help himself, so the tough guy persona melted away for a good 60 seconds until he regained composure and made us all do push-ups. The push-ups were an easy price to pay for that moment. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I work at a basic training range, and we had a drill sergeant yell at this soldier while they were getting ready to go down a buddy live fire exercise. The soldier froze and started crying. This 18-year-old kid was just in tears for getting yelled at. The drill sergeant yelled at him some more and he finally gave up because this kid wouldn't stop crying. So he made him scoop tears off his face and put them in his pockets till he filled his pockets up with tears. He did this for like an hour. It was hilarious. In my basic training class, I was a squad leader, which is essentially just a person who does extra chores. Anyways, for reasons unknown, myself and the other squad leaders were doing push-ups in the drill sergeant's office. Now, when you do these push-ups, you eventually reach muscle failure, so you just sort of hang out there in the front leaning rest and try to bust out another push-up every few seconds or so. We're all in there dying, and the drill sergeant says to one of my buddies, "Private Hudson, tell me what's the difference between basic training and being in prison." Without missing a beat, Private Hudson says, "Drill sergeant, in prison they get to watch TV." The drill sergeant cracked a little bit of a smile and then told us to get up and get out of there. During Air Force BMT, my flight was practicing marching one afternoon. As our flight was still fairly new, our marching was pretty terrible. One of the assistant TIs reamed us all out and then proceeded to awkwardly mock us by marching and walking like Jar Jar Binks while giving a spot-on impression. I'll never forget it. Not a drill sergeant, but when I was in basic, I saw 3 drill sergeants surrounding a private who was laying down, and they were all screaming, "Go the frick to sleep right now, private! You take a goddamn nap this very second, you poor tired soul!" Not the exact words, but you get the gist of it. I still wonder how he got himself into that predicament. When I was in boot camp and on forced marches, my drill instructors loved having conversations using the recruits as messengers. The DI at the end of the formation would send a recruit to the front to give the DI up there a message and back. They'd either have stupid conversations or talk trash using the recruit. During field training exercise, the drill sergeant told me to go get a trash bag, then go around and collect as many pine cones as I could. For like 3 hours, I had a bunch of trash bags. He then took a little walk around the grounds, contemplated for a bit, and then said he was mistaken and the grounds looked better with pine cones in them. He ordered me to redistribute all of the pine cones. We had this kid who kept wetting himself. One day, after the range, he informs our drill instructor that he'd crapped his pants right after the showers. Our squad bay starts to hold back laughter, only to be interrupted by, "It's not funny!" from the drill instructor. Awkward silence. Okay, it's a little funny, but we aren't laughing. That man never cracked a smile during the whole thing. I've got to say, that kid is either way more dumb, desperate, or determined than me if he's willing to join the frat bro armed forces with a condition like that. I hope things worked out for him in the long run. A buddy of mine told a story from when he was at basic. One guy had said, "Yes, ma'am," to the female drill sergeant earlier in the day, so when they were all lined up, she was going down the line asking each person if they'd called her ma'am earlier. The guy who did was fourth in line. He heard the previous guys say, "No, drill sergeant," and then he said in all seriousness, "No, ma'am." You see, what I'm getting from these stories is that the military training is like joining a non-consensual improv troupe. In the US Air Force, I heard a training instructor ask, "Are you finished yet?" A trainee by the name of Dunn said, "No, sir, my name is Dunn." The training instructor walked away to avoid laughing. There was this idiot in my basic training group that after he'd fired his rifle up on his shoulder, pointed the wrong way, towards the drill sergeant clearing it, with the mag still in the weapon. The drill sergeant, a 6'8" bodybuilder, slammed this idiot into the sandbags, screaming at him, and then the recruit had to lay prone in the dirt while holding a stick for a rifle, periodically saying "bang" for the next 3 hours. Somehow, he still graduated with us. Here's a story from my perspective as a recruit in the Navy boot camp. We had an inspection the following day, so our chief was going around inspecting inside everyone's rack to make sure it was squared away. Eventually, he made it over to my section. He was checking the rack, a bunk bed that opens up beside me, and had it propped open so I couldn't see his face, and he must have kind of forgot I was there. He's searching through this one guy's stuff and sees his small gloves. And he asks, "You know what they say about small gloves?" Now, keep in mind, I don't think any of my division commanders heard me talk up until this point, and I said without any hesitation, "I know that's not true. I wear a size 12 boot, but I can tell you right now I don't have a size 12 Johnson." And my chief slammed the rack shut and looked at me. "What the frick?" He then stormed off to the fishbowl, and all you could hear was him trying to hold back his laughter in the office with the 2 petty officers. "What is that disgusting crud all over your glasses, maggot?" "I believe it's your saliva, drill sergeant, sir." Closes eyes and waits for death. I saw 2 guys laugh when a division commander walked in, so he had them stand almost noses touching each other. One would yell, "Want to hear a joke?" and the other would yell, "Ha, ha, ha," repeatedly for hours. It was hilarious at first, but once their voices started to crack, it got old pretty quick. On day 2 of basic training at Lackland Air Force Base, my flight was returning with our newly issued gear after having our heads shaved and other hurry-up-and-wait tasks. Our training instructor told us to go upstairs and stand at attention by our beds. We ran up there tired after attempting to march what felt like 2 miles each way in the August Texas heat. We were all standing there waiting for whatever's going to happen next. After about 5 minutes, Donnie Barnes says, "That Sergeant Gates is a jerk, am I right?" And you would not believe what happened. As soon as Barnes said Gates, the locker directly behind Barnes's pops open with a creak. Barnes is frozen solid. Out of the locker pops one leg after another, and the 3 taps as Sergeant Gates walks out of the locker and puts his mouth directly next to Barnes's ear and shouts in his gravelly voice, "On your face!" We did so many push-ups. One recruit left his training guide just lying on his rack. My lead division commander decided this was punishable by making the recruit stand in the middle of our berthing, holding the training guide in the left hand, saluting with the right, and then bringing it in and gently whispering, "I love you, training guide. I'm sorry I left you out. I'll never leave you lying around again." That crap was hilarious, especially because we were all put at attention while he did it for 45 minutes. Drill instructor made a recruit stand in front of a tree, pointing, saying, "I'm not funny, you are," when he was caught laughing. The drill instructor did actually laugh at that one. Early on in boot camp, we were post-shower and at attention for the hygiene inspection, wearing nothing but skivvies and t-shirts. The DI is walking the line, checking fingernails and whatnot, when one private's Stiff Johnson flops out of his skivvies right as the DI passes him. The DI stops, looks the private in the eye and says, "Private, I don't even like you, much less like you that way. Now put that goddamn thing away before it goes off." The private in question turned purple with embarrassment and tries to stuff his rigid tree trunk back in his skivvies, but he's getting flustered as the guy starts yelling at him for being an incompetent private, and that if he didn't get stowed in 3 seconds, the private would be taking a 10-minute cold shower. Things like, "Do I have to hose you down like an excited chihuahua? Should I call the vet? Good God, private, is that how you greet your mother at night? Stow your gear, goddammit!" Every other private in line was trying not to laugh, and the senior drill instructor had retreated to his office where we could hear him howling with laughter. The private finally gets his junk stowed, and the DI resumes inspection, and you could see he was trying his damnedest not to burst out laughing. Nobody got much sleep that night. There were too many gigglers in their bunks and too many quiet one-liners. Oh boy, you'd think the terror would do something to soften things up down there, but I guess this particular python was paralyzed in fear. I went to Army Basic. I was in the chow line, nut to butt, looking at the back of the guy's head in front of me. All of a sudden, I could feel one of my drill sergeants breathing on me over the separation wall, and he yells, "Carlton, who is your daddy?" To which I responded, "You are, drill sergeant!" My other drill sergeant sprints over and says, "Oh yeah? What does that make me then?" And all I could think to say was, "My mommy, drill sergeant?" Every drill sergeant in the chow hall was dying, and I got the dog crap smoked out of me outside. I have plenty more, either equally funny or possibly even funnier. Like when I was in AIT to be a medic at Fort San, we had to tote a line for bed checks, which is standing on a yellow line by your bunk in your personal training clothes and shower shoes holding your ID card with your tags hanging out, and we used to mess with each other hard in our bay, and right before tote a line, one of my buddies hid one of my shower shoes. So I was in a rush and thinking, frick, okay, I'll just wear one. So I'm standing at half attention in one flip-flop, and my bare foot is just kind of tucked away behind me. Our cadre for check comes up and just looks directly down at my feet, crosses his arms and says, "Carlton, what in the Sam hell are you doing?" All I could get out was to say, "Sergeant, I couldn't find my other shower shoe for bed check." And I think I'd been saving this one up, because he started to smirk and just yelled, "God damn it, Carlton, you're more ate up than a chocolate member in a gay bar," triggering giggles and snickers all throughout the bay. Thankfully, our school cadre were a lot more chill than drill sergeants. We had a TI and TI in training with us when we were marching to a class. Some people were out of step, so the TI started screaming, "Don't you know your right from your left? Did the antenna fall out of your house when you were a kid? Didn't your mommy and daddy let you watch 3-2-1 Contact?" The TI in training lost it, and so did I. I asked my dad about this. He was a recruit division commander. He shrugged and says, "Oh, I laughed. Your hat is called your cover? It's the first day. I wanted some recruits from the back to the front to carry stuff. I said, 'Get up here with your covers,' and they went and grabbed their bed sheets." When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.